3 months had transformed the Avengers from mysterious warriors into living legends across the Outer Rim. Their faces appeared on rebel recruitment holoposters, cantina songs celebrated their victories, children in occupied systems whispered their names like prayers against the darkness. But legends had a price, and the Empire was determined to collect. The rebel fleet hung in the void between stars, a mobile city of cruisers, frigates, and support ships that never stayed in one system longer than a week. Constant movement was survival the moment they became predictable. The Empire would bring overwhelming force to bear. Tony Stark stood in what had become his workshop aboard the Mon Calamari cruiser Liberty's Hope, surrounded by a hybrid of Earth and galactic technology that would have made any engineer weep with joy or confusion. The dimensional gateway dominated the workspace, a circular frame 10 meters in diameter, constructed from materials scavenged across a dozen systems. Kyber crystals stolen from Imperial weapons projects provided exotic energy matrices. Hyperdrive components cannibalized from destroyed Star Destroyers formed the spatial displacement core. And at the center of it all, 3 arc reactors working in synchronized harmony provided the massive power requirements. "Jarvis, run the simulation again," Tony said, his eyes bloodshot from 72 hours without sleep. "Adjust the quantum harmonics by 0.03%. Sir, that is the 47th simulation in the past 6 hours. The results remain consistent. The gateway will function, but the power requirements exceed our current capacity by 18%. Additionally, activating the device will create a gravimetric distortion visible across 3 star systems. Every Imperial ship within sensor range will detect it immediately, so we need more power and better stealth." Tony rubbed his face, feeling every one of his Earth years plus the 3 months of constant warfare. "And we need it before." An explosion rocked the ship. Alarms shrieked through the corridors, and the emergency lighting cast everything in red. Tony's armor assembled around him in seconds, the nanotech flowing from the arc reactor housing he now wore constantly. "Jarvis, report. Imperial attack, sir. 3 Star Destroyers just dropped out of hyperspace. They knew exactly where to find us." In the Liberty's Hope Command Center, Admiral Radis, a Mon Calamari officer with decades of naval experience, was coordinating the fleet's defense. "All ships. Evasive maneuvers. Fighters launch immediately." "How did they find us?" Steve Rogers was already there, shield on his arm, his tactical mind processing the situation. 3 months of fighting the Empire had taught him their patterns, their strategies. This wasn't random. They're not deploying in standard search formation, they came straight for us. Someone told them where we'd be. Princess Leia arrived on the bridge, her expression grim. "A spy. We've suspected for weeks that information was leaking, but we couldn't prove it." Through the viewports, TIE fighters were already engaging the rebel fleet's X-wings and A-wings. Green laser fire stitched across the black, fighters exploding in silent flowers of flame. But something was different this time. The Imperial fighters were coordinating with unusual precision, their tactics specifically designed to counter the advantages Tony's tactical AI had been providing. "They've adapted," Natasha observed, reading the battle patterns with an assassin's eye for detail. She and Clint had been running drills with rebel commandos when the attack started, but now they stood on the bridge, evaluating threats. "Those TIE pilots are flying like they know exactly what we'll do." "Because they do," Hera said, her hands flying over the tactical console. "Look at the attack vectors. They're compensating for Jarvis's predictive algorithms. They're jamming our secure channels. They even know our fallback rendezvous points." She turned to Leia, fear in her eyes. Someone gave them everything. Thor materialized on the bridge in a flash of lightning, having transported from the Liberty's Hope's hangar where he'd been training with young rebel pilots. 3 months of war had left marks on the Asgardian, new scars visible through gaps in his repaired armor, a weight in his eyes that hadn't been there before. But his resolve was undiminished. "I can engage their lead destroyer," he said. "Drive them back long enough for the fleet to jump to hyperspace." "No." Steve's voice carried command authority. "We've used that tactic 3 times. They'll be ready for it, probably have specialized weapons specifically designed to counter you. He studied the tactical display, seeing the trap forming. They want us to react predictably, to do what we've always done. Then what do we do? Radis demanded. We're outnumbered and they have firing solutions on our capital ships. Bruce Banner entered the bridge, his presence immediately drawing attention. The Hulk's emergence at Yavin 4 had become the stuff of legend, but Bruce himself remained haunted by it. He'd spent 3 months working with Rebel medical staff, trying to understand the connection between stress, transformation, and control. Progress had been minimal. How bad? He asked quietly. Bad enough that we might need the big guy, Clint said. Bruce's jaw tightened. Then we're desperate. Tony arrived via armor flight, landing on the bridge with repulsors flaring. I've got an idea, but it's crazy even by our standards. Those are always your best ideas, Steve said. Talk fast. The dimensional gateway, it's not ready for actual use, but it can generate a massive gravimetric pulse. If I overload the arc reactors and release all that exotic energy at once, it'll create a space-time distortion that'll knock out every sensor, targeting computer and navigational system in the area, including ours. That's suicide, Radis said flatly. Without navigation, we can't jump to hyperspace. We'd be dead in space, unless we calculate jump coordinates before triggering the pulse, Jarvis interjected. If every ship has pre-programmed hyperspace routes, they could execute blind jumps the moment their hyperdrives come back online. Blind jumps? Leia looked horrified. Do you know how dangerous that is? Without real-time astrogation, we could fly through a star, collide with a planet, or we stay here and get destroyed by 3 star destroyers that know every move we'll make, Tony countered. I'm not saying it's safe. I'm saying it's our only option. Steve made the decision in seconds, the same battlefield instinct that had served him through 2 world wars and countless Avengers operations. Do it. Jarvis, transmit jump coordinates to every ship in the fleet. Admiral, get everyone ready to jump on my signal. This is insane, Radis muttered, but he was already issuing orders. Tony's armor rocketed back toward his workshop. Behind him, the Imperial assault intensified. The lead star destroyer, the Adjudicator, commanded by Admiral Cassio Tag, opened up with its main batteries. Turbolaser bolts the size of starfighters hammered into the Liberty's Hope's shields, each impact sending shockwaves through the ship. Shields at 40%, an officer reported. We can't take much more. Thor couldn't stand by while his friends were in danger. He launched himself through the hangar bay's magnetic field, Mjolnir spinning as he flew toward the Adjudicator. If he couldn't destroy it, he could at least distract it. He struck the destroyer's forward shields with enough force to crack them, lightning exploding across the energy barrier. The ship's point defense cannons immediately focused on him, hundreds of laser bolts converging. Thor dodged and weaved, his Asgardian reflexes barely keeping him ahead of the firestorm. On the Adjudicator's bridge, Admiral Tage watched the Asgardians' assault with cold calculation. Deploy the countermeasure, a specialized weapon system designed over 3 months of studying the Avengers' tactics, emerged from the destroyer's underbelly. It looked like a standard ion cannon, but the energy it fired was different, darker. When it struck Thor, the lightning wreathing his body sputtered and died. What? Thor's eyes widened as he felt his connection to the storm weaken. The weapon was firing some kind of force-damping energy, a technique the Empire had developed for fighting Jedi survivors. It didn't work perfectly on Asgardian magic, but it worked enough. Without his lightning, Thor was just an extremely strong, durable warrior, still formidable but vulnerable. A concentrated barrage of turbo laser fire caught him, and he was driven back toward the rebel fleet, his armor smoking. Thor. Steve watched helplessly as his friend was forced to retreat. Someone get him back aboard. Hera was already moving, the Ghost launching from the Liberty's Hope's hangar. She flew through the firefight with insane precision, her freighter's tractor beam catching Thor and pulling him aboard even as TIE fighters tried to intercept. In his workshop, Tony worked with manic intensity. The dimensional gateway was never meant to be weaponized, never designed for the kind of overload he was attempting, but desperate times demanded desperate measures. Jarvis, I need you to sync with every ship's computer in the fleet. The moment this pulse hits, they'll have maybe 3 seconds before their hyperdrives reboot. That's the window for blind jumps. Sir, the margin for error is, I know, but perfect isn't an option today. Close enough will have to do. The arc reactors began overcharging, their distinctive whine rising to a scream. Energy coursed through the gateway's framework, kyber crystals blazing with light that hurt to look at directly. Tony's armor registered critical warnings across every system. On the bridge, Steve coordinated the final preparations. All ships report, ready for blind jump. We're committed. He looked at his team, Natasha and Clint, ready for whatever came next. Bruce struggling to maintain control as stress pushed the Hulk closer to the surface, Thor recovering but visibly weakened. Whatever happens, we face it together. Always have, Natasha said simply. The Adjudicator's main batteries were charging for a final volley that would crack the Liberty's hope like an egg. Admiral Tagay smiled coldly. Inform Lord Vader the rebels are destroyed, and the Avengers, the dimensional gateway overloaded. Reality screamed. Space-time folded in ways it was never meant to, creating a gravimetric shockwave that radiated outward at faster than light speeds. Every electronic system in the area simply stopped, not destroyed, but overwhelmed by exotic energies that existed outside normal physics. On the Adjudicator's bridge, every screen went dark. Life support failed. Gravity disappeared as the ship's systems crashed. In the sudden silence, Tagay floated in zero-G, horror replacing his confidence. All ships, jump now, Steve ordered. The rebel fleet engaged their hyperdrives in the 3-second window before systems crashed. Jump coordinates calculated by Jarvis sent them scattering across the galaxy, not to safe harbors or planned destinations, but to random coordinates that the Empire couldn't predict because they were pure mathematical randomness. The Liberty's Hope's hyperdrive engaged, and the stars stretched into lines. They were escaping, but scattered and vulnerable. Their fleet fractured across dozens of systems. Tony's workshop was a smoking ruin. The dimensional gateway had melted into slag, 3 months of work destroyed in seconds. His armor had shut down completely, the arc reactor drained to near zero. He sat in the wreckage, breathing hard, knowing he'd just set their journey home back to zero. But the fleet had survived. That had to count for something. On the Executor, light years away, Darth Vader received Admiral Tagay's report. The attack had failed. The rebels had escaped using a technique that shouldn't exist, weaponized space-time manipulation that went beyond anything even the Sith had achieved. These Avengers continue to surprise, Vader said to the Grand Inquisitor, who stood at attention nearby. They sacrifice their own goals to save others. That compassion is their greatest strength. His fist clenched slowly. And their greatest weakness. We will use it to destroy them. What are your orders, Lord Vader? Find where they scattered, identify their weakest ships, and prepare a trap that will force the Avengers to choose. Vader turned, his cape swirling, between saving their rebel allies and ever seeing their home again. In hyperspace, scattered across the galaxy, the rebel fleet fled through impossible distances. They'd survived, but at what cost? Their fleet was fractured, their security compromised by a spy they still hadn't identified, and the Avengers' only path home had just been destroyed. Steve stood on the Liberty's Hope's bridge, watching hyperspace stream past, and wondered if this was how the war would end, not in glorious victory or tragic defeat, but in endless running, always one step ahead of an enemy that never stopped coming. Cap? Natasha's voice was quiet. What now? Steve looked at his team, at the rebels who'd trusted them, at the impossible situation they'd created by choosing to fight. Now, we regroup, we find the spy, we rebuild, and we figure out how to win a war we were never supposed to be part of. No pressure, Clint muttered. But as the Liberty's Hope dropped out of hyperspace in an uncharted system, limping and damaged, they all understood the truth. The Empire was learning, adapting, and the Avengers' greatest victories were behind them. The real war was just beginning. The uncharted system where the Liberty's hope emerged was a graveyard not of ships, but of a civilization. 3 dead planets orbited a dying red giant, their surfaces scorched lifeless millennia ago. It was perfect for a hidden rendezvous, precisely because nothing lived here. Nothing worth the Empire's attention. Over the next 48 hours, 17 rebel ships limped into the system, their crews exhausted and their vessels damaged. It was less than half the fleet that had scattered from the Imperial ambush. The others were either destroyed, captured, or still lost in hyperspace, their blind jumps carrying them to unknown destinations. Steve stood in what passed for the Liberty's Hope's situation room, staring at the holographic map showing confirmed ship positions. Too many were missing. The medical frigate, Redemption, gone. The assault carrier, Thunderstrike, no contact. Dozens of smaller vessels simply vanished into the galaxy. We lost over 1,000 people, Hera said quietly, her usually steady voice cracking. Maybe more if the missing ships were intercepted, and we still don't know who the spy is. Actually, Natasha entered, datapad in hand, and an expression that promised violence. We do. Everyone turned. The Black Widow had spent the last 2 days doing what she did best, hunting. She'd interviewed crew members, cross-referenced communication logs, tracked information flow patterns that even Jarvis had missed, and she'd found something. Commander Van Tal, she said, bringing up a holographic image of a human officer in his 40s, decorated for service, trusted by rebel leadership. He's been with the Alliance for 3 years, fought at Scarif, survived the Death Star evacuation. Everyone trusts him. And he's Imperial intelligence, Leia said, recognition dawning with sick certainty. A deep cover agent, deeper than you know. Natasha pulled up Tal's service record, highlighting anomalies that were invisible unless you knew what to look for. He was planted before the Death Star was even built. His entire defection was staged false Imperial brutality, manufactured hatred, all designed to create the perfect backstory. He's been feeding information to the Empire for 3 years, but they only activated him recently. When we arrived, Steve realized, they wanted intelligence on us specifically, which he's been providing. Natasha showed communication logs, encrypted transmissions hidden in routine status reports. Every tactical discussion, every mission parameter, every detail about our capabilities, all sent to Imperial intelligence within hours. That's how they knew where we'd be. That's how they adapted their tactics to counter Jarvis's algorithms. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened, lightning dancing across the hammer's surface. Where is this traitor now? Engineering deck, supervising shield repairs, Natasha said. He doesn't know we've identified him. I recommend we take him alive, find out what else he's compromised, what other agents might be embedded in the fleet. Agreed, Leia said, but her expression was haunted. 3 years. How many rebels died because of his intelligence? How many missions failed because the Empire knew we were coming? Before anyone could respond, alarms blared across the ship. The tactical display lit up with new contacts, a single Imperial shuttle dropping out of hyperspace, its transponder broadcasting on all frequencies, diplomatic envoy requesting parley, unarmed vessel carrying a message for the Avengers from the Emperor himself. It's a trick, Clint said immediately. Has to be. Tony's armor scanned the approaching shuttle, Jarvis running every analysis possible. No weapons, no troops, just 1 pilot and 1 passenger, but the passengers giving off some weird energy readings. He paused, sensors confirming what he'd feared. It's force-sensitive, powerful, not Vader, but close. The shuttle requested permission to dock, and after heated debate, Raddus gave clearance. They brought it into a sealed hangar bay, surrounded by rebel soldiers with weapons trained on the airlock. When the ramp lowered, a single figure descended. She was human, middle-aged, wearing the robes of an Imperial Inquisitor, but without the mask. Her face was scarred, her eyes yellow with dark side corruption, but she moved with the confidence of someone who knew she was untouchable. I am the third sister, she said, her voice carrying force-enhanced resonance. "I come bearing an offer from Emperor Palpatine himself." Steve stepped forward, shield raised but not threatening. "We don't negotiate with the Empire. You will want to hear this." The third sister smiled without warmth. "The Emperor knows of your desire to return home. He knows of the dimensional gateway that was destroyed in your escape, and he knows," her smile widened, "that you cannot build another without materials that exist only in Imperial-controlled space." Tony's jaw tightened. It was true. The exotic matter needed for the gateway's core came from mines in the deep core, territory so heavily fortified that even thinking about a raid was suicide. "The Emperor offers a trade," the third sister continued. "The materials you need, complete access to Imperial research on dimensional travel, and safe passage for your entire team through a stable gateway we will construct. In exchange," she paused for effect, "you surrender yourselves to Imperial custody and cease all support for the rebellion." "Absolutely not," Leia said immediately. But the third sister wasn't finished. "The Emperor is generous. He understands you are warriors, not traitors to this galaxy. He holds no grudge for the damage you've caused. Surrender peacefully, and he guarantees the rebellion will not be pursued for 30 days, more than enough time for them to escape and regroup. Your cooperation for their survival, your freedom for their lives." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone understood what was being offered. The Avengers could go home, could return to Earth and resume their lives, could escape this impossible war. All they had to do was abandon the rebellion in its darkest hour. "How do we know he'll honor this deal?" Bruce asked quietly. "You have the Emperor's word," the third sister said, then laughed at the absurdity. "Which means nothing, I know. But consider the alternative: continue fighting a war you cannot win, in a galaxy that is not your own, until you die far from home. Or accept his offer and live." "We need time to discuss this," Steve said. "You have 1 hour." The third sister returned to her shuttle. "After that, I depart and the offer expires. Choose wisely, Avengers. Not many receive the Emperor's mercy." As the shuttle sealed itself, the Avengers gathered in a private conference room. The argument that followed was the most heated they'd had since arriving in this galaxy. "It's obviously a trap," Natasha said. "The moment we're in Imperial custody, they'll kill us, or worse, study us, dissect us, use our technology against the rebellion. But the offer of materials is real," Tony countered. "I've been analyzing Imperial supply chains for months. The exotic matter we need only exists in 3 locations, all heavily guarded. Without it, I can't rebuild the gateway. We're stuck here permanently." "Then we're stuck here," Steve said firmly. "We don't abandon people who are counting on us just to save ourselves." "Even if staying means we die here?" Clint asked. "Because let's be real, Cap, the Empire's adapting. That ambush proved they're learning from every engagement. Eventually, our luck runs out." Thor had been silent, but now he spoke with the weight of centuries. "On Asgard, we have tales of warriors trapped in foreign realms. Some fought until they fell, becoming legends. Others accepted bargains to return home, only to find their homecoming hollow their honor traded for comfort. I know which tale I would rather embody. But this isn't just about honor," Bruce said, his voice strained. "Every time we fight, people die. Rebels, civilians caught in the crossfire, even Imperial soldiers who are just following orders. At what point does our continued presence cause more harm than good?" The room fell silent at that. It was the question they'd all been avoiding since Coruscant. Were they helping or just making things worse? Leia had been listening from the doorway. Now she entered, her expression resolute. "I can't make this decision for you, but I can tell you what your choice means to the rebellion. You've become symbols, proof that the Empire can be fought, that their power has limits. If you surrender now, that symbol dies, hope dies, and the Empire wins without firing another shot. But if we refuse and stay," Tony said slowly, "we condemn ourselves to this galaxy permanently. No going home, no seeing Earth again, fighting and dying in someone else's war. Steve looked at each team member, reading their faces. Natasha was ready to fight. She'd spent her life making hard calls and living with consequences. Clint was conflicted but loyal. He'd follow the team's decision either way. Thor knew his choice: honor over comfort, always. Bruce was torn between his desire to help and his fear of the damage the Hulk caused. And Tony was calculating odds, running scenarios, trying to find the genius solution that didn't require impossible sacrifice. "We vote," Steve said. "Same as before. This is too important for me to decide alone. But understand, whatever we choose together. No second guessing, no regret. We're a team." Before anyone could vote, Hera burst through the door. "We have a problem." Long-range sensors just picked up multiple Imperial signatures dropping out of hyperspace on the system's edge. "It's a trap." The diplomatic envoy was a beacon. On the tactical display, the horror became clear. 6 Star destroyers, including the Executor, had formed a blockade around the system. TIE fighters were launching by the hundreds, and leading them all, Darth Vader's personal shuttle was making directly for their location. "How long until they're in weapons range?" Radis demanded. 20 minutes, the sensor officer reported. "And they're deploying interdictor cruisers. We can't jump to hyperspace until those are destroyed." The third sister's hologram appeared, transmitted from her shuttle, which was already fleeing toward the Imperial fleet. "The Emperor thanks you for gathering his enemies in one convenient location. Lord Vader will accept your surrender personally. Resistance is, as always, futile." "Guess that answers our vote," Clint said, already reaching for his bow. Steve's expression hardened into the look that had inspired soldiers for decades. "Jarvis, I need tactical options. Hera, get every fighter pilot to their ships. Tony, how fast can you get the Liberty's Hope's weapons back online?" "Already done," Tony said, his armor sealing around him. "But Cap, we're outnumbered 6-1 with damaged ships and exhausted crews. Even with home field advantage, we don't need to win," Steve interrupted. "We need to break through their blockade long enough for some ships to escape. We save who we can, then scatter and regroup. A fighting retreat," Thor said, approval in his voice. "Honorable and practical. I volunteer to engage the Executor directly. Create an opening." "No," Natasha's voice cut through the planning. "We're not doing this blind. We have an asset we haven't used, Commander Tal. He's been feeding intelligence to the Empire, which means he knows their communication protocols, their security codes, maybe even Vader's assault strategy." "You want to interrogate him now?" Leia asked. "We have maybe 15 minutes, which is all I need." Natasha's expression promised pain. "I'll make him talk." She left before anyone could object, Clint following to provide backup. They found Commander Tal in engineering, still performing his duties with the dedication of a man who believed his cover intact. "Commander," Natasha said pleasantly, "need you for a moment. Security matter." Tal looked up, his expression open and helpful. "Of course. What's the situation?" "The situation," Clint said, arrow already nocked, "is that you're a traitor, and we're out of time for polite questions." Tal's facade cracked. His hand moved toward a concealed weapon, but Natasha was faster. She crossed the distance between them in a blur of motion, her strike hitting nerve clusters that left him paralyzed but conscious. They dragged him to a secure room as alarms continued to blare. "I'll never talk," Tal said through gritted teeth. "I'm trained to resist." "Everyone says that," Natasha replied, her voice cold and professional. She pulled out a device she'd borrowed from Rebel intelligence, a truth serum derived from alien biochemistry. Not quite as refined as S.H.I.E.L.D.'s methods, but effective. "But you're going to tell me everything. Vader's attack plan, the interdictor positions, and most importantly," she leaned close, "any weaknesses in their blockade formation." The serum worked quickly. Within minutes, Tal was talking. His Imperial training no match for alien biochemistry, and Natasha Romanoff's interrogation skills. He revealed everything. The interdictor cruisers were positioned to prevent hyperspace jumps, but they had blind spots in their coverage. The Executor would lead the assault personally, but 2 of the Star Destroyers were actually holding back, positioned to intercept any rebel ships that tried to flee. And there was more, something that made Natasha's blood run cold. The Emperor wants prisoners, Tal slurred through the drug haze, especially the Avengers. Vader has orders to capture, not kill. He's deploying boarding parties equipped with experimental weapons, force suppressors, containment fields, weapons specifically designed to counter your abilities. They've been studying us, Clint realized. Every fight, every tactic we've used, they've been preparing countermeasures. Natasha transmitted the intelligence to the bridge, where Steve absorbed it with grim determination. They'd walked into a trap designed specifically for them, and the Empire had spent 3 months preparing the perfect cage. Then we don't fight the way they expect, Steve said. Jarvis, using Tal's intelligence, calculate attack vectors that exploit the interdictor blind spots. Radus, prepare all combat-capable ships for a concentrated assault on the weakest point in their formation. Thor, Hulk, you're our breakthrough force. Hit them so hard they don't have time to adapt. What about you? Leia asked. Steve picked up his shield, the vibranium disc bearing new scars from 3 months of war. I'm leading the boarding action. If Vader wants prisoners, he'll have to come through me first. The Imperial fleet closed in, their formation perfect, their tactics flawless. On the Executor's bridge, Darth Vader stood before the viewport, his respirator marking steady rhythm as he sensed the coming battle. The Avengers will not surrender, he said to Admiral Piet. They will fight, even knowing defeat is certain. That makes them dangerous. Should we be concerned, Lord Vader? Vader's fist clenched slowly. Concerned? No, but cautious. These warriors have survived every engagement through unpredictability and sacrifice. Today, we will see how far they're willing to go. The third sister approached, bowing. The trap is set, Lord Vader. The rebels are exactly where we want them. Good. Vader turned from the viewport. Then let us end this. For the Emperor, for the Empire, and for the satisfaction of proving that no power, not even that which comes from beyond the stars, can stand against the dark side. The rebel fleet powered up weapons and shields, damaged ships preparing for one final battle. X-Wings launched from hangar bays, their pilots knowing many wouldn't return, and the Avengers stood ready, 6 warriors from Earth, facing an empire that spanned the galaxy, refusing to surrender, because that's what heroes did. The battle for survival was about to begin. The opening salvo transformed space into a hellscape of energy and violence. The Executor's turbo laser batteries opened fire first, green lances of destruction reaching across the void toward the Liberty's hope. Admiral Radus had positioned the Mon Calamari cruiser at the center of the rebel formation, its reinforced shields designed to absorb punishment that would vaporize lesser vessels. All power to forward shields, Radus commanded, as the turbolaser impacts sent shockwaves through the ship. Return fire, target the Executor's shield generators. The Liberty's Hope's ion cannons blazed, joined by fire from a dozen smaller vessels. But the Executor was 8 kilometers of military engineering designed to dominate battlefields. Its shields barely flickered under the assault. This isn't working, Tony transmitted from where he flew in formation with rebel fighters. His armor had been repaired enough to fight, though several systems still showed damage from the dimensional gateway overload. Jarvis, what's our window for breaking through to the interdictors? Current analysis suggests a coordinated assault on the left flank Star Destroyer the Relentless would create a temporary gap. However, the window would last approximately 43 seconds before Imperial forces compensate. 43 seconds to destroy an interdictor cruiser and jump to hyperspace. Tony ran the calculations. That's impossible. Sir, I believe that's our specialty. Steve's voice cut through the comms. All Avengers, listen up. We're going for the left flank, one coordinated strike. Thor, you hit the Relentless's shield generators. Hulk, you tear through their hull and disable their weapon systems. Tony, you take out their tractor beam projectors. Natasha, Clint, and I will lead boarding parties to secure the bridge. Everyone clear? Crystal. Natasha replied from the assault shuttle she was piloting, loaded with 30 rebel commandos. Bruce Banner stood in the Liberty's Hope's launch bay, feeling the familiar tension as the Hulk pressed against his consciousness. The other guy wanted out, wanted to smash, wanted to protect their friends from the overwhelming force trying to destroy them. Bruce took a breath and let go. The transformation was instant. Green skin, massive muscles, and gamma-powered rage erupted as the Hulk roared his defiance. Rebel soldiers scrambled back as the 3-meter giant charged toward the launch bay's atmospheric field. "Hulk, smash Empire ships," he bellowed, and launched himself into vacuum. The Hulk could survive in space briefly. His gamma-enhanced physiology could withstand conditions that would kill any normal being, though even he had limits. He flew through the void like a green missile, powered by sheer muscle strength and rage-fueled momentum, straight toward the Relentless. Thor launched simultaneously, Mjolnir spinning as lightning wreathed his body despite the vacuum. The Empire's force-dampening technology had been effective before, but Thor had spent 3 months studying how it worked, understanding its limitations. He knew now how to fight through it, how to channel Asgardian power in ways the Empire couldn't predict. They struck the Relentless within seconds of each other. Thor's hammer smashed into the primary shield generator, and divine lightning surged through the systems, overloading circuits designed for conventional warfare. The shields flickered and collapsed on the forward section just as the Hulk impacted the exposed hull. Durasteel armor plating crumpled under gamma-enhanced fists. The Hulk tore through the outer hull like paper, ripping away sections to expose the inner workings of the Star Destroyer. Atmosphere vented, carrying crew members into the void. The Hulk felt a moment of regret. These were people, not just enemies, but the rage pushed past guilt as turbo lasers swiveled to target him at point-blank range. He grabbed one turbo laser battery and simply tore it from its housing, circuits sparking and hydraulics failing. Then he used it as a club against the adjacent weapon system, smashing Imperial military hardware with Imperial military hardware. On the Relentless's bridge, Captain Bolvan watched his ship come apart with disbelief. "How is this possible? They're attacking us in vacuum without ships." "Sir, the green creature is tearing through decks 7 through 12. The other one, the one with the hammer, just destroyed both shield generators. Deploy all troops, stormtroopers, security teams, everyone. Kill those." Tony Stark appeared outside the bridge viewport, his armor's repulsors flaring. He smiled behind his faceplate and fired his unibeam at maximum power. The concentrated energy beam punched through the reinforced transparent steel, and explosive decompression did the rest. The bridge was compromised in seconds, Bolvan and his crew dead before emergency bulkheads could seal. "Jarvis, hack their systems. I need weapons offline and tractor beams disabled." "Already working, sir. Their security is surprisingly robust this time. They've upgraded since our last engagement. Then work faster. We've got maybe 20 seconds before the other Star Destroyers adjust their targeting." Inside the Relentless, Steve Rogers led his boarding party through corridors that were chaos incarnate. Emergency lights cast everything in red, alarms screamed, and stormtroopers rushed to defensive positions. But Steve had fought through worse D-Day, Hydra facilities. Sokovia and his enhanced reflexes made him nearly untouchable in close quarters. His shield flew ahead, ricocheting between 3 stormtroopers before returning to his hand. The super soldier followed up with precise strikes, his combat experience turning every corner into a kill zone for Imperial troops. Behind him, rebel commandos provided covering fire, their blasters singing in the confined space. Natasha and Clint were working through the opposite side of the ship, their combined skills making them a perfect infiltration team. Natasha moved like liquid death through the corridors, taking down stormtroopers with efficiency that bordered on art. Clint provided overwatch, his arrows finding targets through impossible angles, heating vents, reflective surfaces, ricochets that defied physics. "Engineering deck secured," Natasha reported, "placing charges on the hyperdrive. If we can't escape, Neither do they. On the Executor's bridge, Darth Vader watched the Relentless's systematic destruction with cold calculation. The Avengers were performing exactly as expected: direct assault, overwhelming force, coordinated tactics that maximized their individual strengths, which meant it was time to deploy the countermeasures. Activate the containment protocols, he ordered, and deploy the purge troopers. Deep within the Relentless, specialized troops emerged from sealed barracks. These weren't standard stormtroopers, they were the purge troopers. Elite soldiers trained specifically to hunt force-sensitive targets. Their armor was heavier, their weapons more sophisticated, and they carried devices that emitted the same force-dampening energy that had affected Thor before. But the purge troopers had never fought someone like the Hulk. They found him on Deck 9, surrounded by the wreckage of destroyed weapon systems and unconscious stormtroopers. The Hulk had been pulling his punches, trying not to kill, trying to maintain some shred of Bruce Banner's compassion, even through the rage. The purge troopers opened fire with weapons that shouldn't exist. Energy projectors that caused pain on a cellular level, designed to overwhelm nervous systems. Against a Jedi, they were devastating. Against the Hulk, they just made him angrier. "Puny soldiers hurt Hulk," he roared, and the rage intensified. His skin darkened to a deeper green, muscles expanding beyond even his normal transformation. This was the Hulk at his angriest, the version of himself that could match Thanos blow for blow. He grabbed a purge trooper and threw him through 3 bulkheads. Another he simply crushed, the enhanced armor crumpling like aluminum foil. The remaining troops scattered, their training evaporating in the face of something they'd never been prepared for. But the distraction had done its job. While the Hulk fought purge troopers, magnetic containment fields activated throughout the ship. Force suppression technology scaled up to capital ship levels. The fields didn't stop the Hulk, but they slowed him, made his movements sluggish as exotic energy interfered with gamma radiation in ways that shouldn't be possible. Thor felt it too. His connection to lightning weakened, Mjolnir growing heavier in his grip. The Asgardian power that let him fly, summon storms, and strike with divine fury, all of it dampened by technology reverse-engineered from ancient Sith techniques. "Jarvis, they've got some kind of suppression field active," Tony reported, his armor's systems showing interference patterns. "It's affecting Thor, and probably the Hulk. We need to shut it down." "Sir, the field generators are located in the ship's power core, heavily shielded and guarded by at least 50 troops. "Then I guess I'm going through 50 troops." Tony rocketed through the Relentless's corridors, his weapons blazing. Stormtroopers tried to establish firing lines, but they were designed for ground combat, not for fighting an opponent who could fly at high speed through enclosed spaces. His repulsors cleared paths, his micro-missiles eliminated clusters of troops, and his unibeam carved through blast doors like they were cardboard. He reached the power core just as Steve's team arrived from the opposite direction. The super soldier was breathing hard, even enhanced physiology had limits, but his eyes were sharp and his shield was ready. "The suppression field?" Steve asked. "Those generators?" Tony highlighted 3 massive devices built into the power core's housing. "Destroy them, and Thor gets his lightning back. Hulk stops fighting at half strength. Then let's..." The blast door behind them sealed with a magnetic lock that even Steve's strength couldn't break. And stepping through the shadows came a figure they'd all heard about but never faced directly. The Grand Inquisitor. He was tall, gaunt, his yellow eyes burning with dark side corruption. His lightsaber ignited a spinning double blade that hummed with deadly energy. "The Emperor sends his regards," the Grand Inquisitor said, his voice carrying force-enhanced menace. "Your assault ends here." Steve raised his shield. "We've fought worse than you." "Doubtful." The Inquisitor moved with inhuman speed, his lightsaber spinning in techniques designed to overwhelm and intimidate. The blade struck Steve's shield, and the impact sent sparks flying, vibranium versus plasma contained in a magnetic field, physics that shouldn't coexist. Tony engaged from range, his repulsors firing in coordinated bursts. But the Inquisitor's precognition let him dodge or deflect every shot. the Force showing him attacks before they landed. His spinning lightsaber created a defensive barrier that conventional weapons couldn't penetrate. "You fight without the Force," the Inquisitor said, pressing his attack against Steve. "That makes you blind. I can see your every move before you make it. Then stop seeing this." Clint's arrow came from an impossible angle reflected off a polished surface, changing trajectory mid-flight through a secondary charge. It struck the Inquisitor in the shoulder, and for just a moment, his precognition failed him. Steve capitalized instantly. His shield crashed into the Inquisitor's head, the impact stunning him. Natasha followed up with a nerve strike that would have dropped a normal opponent. But the Inquisitor was sustained by the dark side, pain fueling his power rather than diminishing it. He swept his lightsaber in a wide arc that forced everyone back, then raised his hand. Force lightning, crude compared to Vader or the Emperor, but still devastating, erupted from his fingertips. Tony's shields absorbed most of it, but systems overloaded across his armor. Steve's shield protected him, but the rebel commandos behind him weren't so lucky. 3 soldiers went down screaming, their nervous systems fried. Enough. The Hulk crashed through the ceiling. Having torn his way through 6 decks while fighting suppression fields and purge troopers, he was wounded, blaster burns covering his torso, one arm hanging at an odd angle, but he was the Hulk. And the Hulk didn't stop. The Grand Inquisitor turned his force lightning on the green giant. The electricity coursed through gamma-enhanced tissue, burning and devastating. But pain just made the Hulk angrier, and angrier meant stronger. "Hulk, strongest there is," he roared through the lightning, forcing his way forward one impossible step at a time. His massive hand closed around the Inquisitor's throat, lifting him off the ground. The Inquisitor's eyes widened with genuine fear. He tried to use the Force, tried to choke the Hulk, tried every dark side technique he knew. None of it worked against something that existed outside the Force's influence. "You chose wrong enemy," the Hulk said, Bruce's voice emerging through the rage, controlled fury rather than mindless destruction. And he squeezed. The Grand Inquisitor's neck snapped. His body went limp, lightsaber clattering to the deck. The Hulk dropped him without ceremony and pointed at the suppression field generators. "Hulk, smash those?" "Yeah, buddy," Tony said, his voice shaken. "Smash those," the Hulk obliged with enthusiasm. 3 massive fists later, the generators were scrap metal and the suppression field collapsed. Throughout the ship, Thor felt his power return, lightning blazing back to full strength. "Jarvis, status on the Interdictor cruiser." "The Avengers' assault has created the opening, sir. The Interdictor Gladiator is within weapons range, but our window is collapsing. We have perhaps 30 seconds, then we use them." Steve activated the shipwide comm. "All hands, abandon the Relentless. Get to your ships and prepare for hyperspace jump." The rebel boarding parties retreated in organized chaos, fighting their way back to shuttles and fighters. The Hulk carried wounded soldiers, his massive strength making him a one-being rescue operation. Thor provided cover, his lightning striking down pursuing stormtroopers. Outside the Relentless, the rebel fleet had been hammering the Interdictor cruiser with everything they had. The Gladiator's shields were failing, its hull breached in multiple locations. One final coordinated strike would destroy it and open their escape route. "All ships, concentrate fire on the Gladiator," Rudus ordered. "Fire everything. Turbo lasers, ion cannons, proton torpedoes, every weapon the rebel fleet possessed, unleashed simultaneously." The Interdictor's shields collapsed completely, and the devastating barrage tore through its hull. Secondary explosions rippled across the ship as power systems failed and gravity well projectors overloaded. The Gladiator broke apart, its death creating a gap in the Imperial blockade. "Now," Steve shouted. Everyone jumped to hyperspace. Jarvis had pre-calculated coordinates for every ship, sending them to different systems to prevent the Empire from tracking them. One by one, rebel vessels engaged their hyperdrives. X-wings, Y-wings, frigates, transports. The fleet scattered into hyperspace, escaping through the gap created by impossible sacrifice. The Liberty's hope was lost, its engines damaged and struggling. On the bridge, Raddus watched the other ships escape and allowed himself a moment of hope. They'd survived. Against 6 Star Destroyers and Darth Vader himself, they'd survived. Hyperdrive charging, the engineer reported. 30 seconds to jump capability. Through the viewport, the Executor was turning, its massive bulk moving to intercept. And launching from its hangar bay was a single Imperial shuttle, moving with speed that spoke of someone very important aboard. Lord Vader, Hera breathed. He's coming himself. Steve felt time slow down as tactical instinct processed their situation. The Liberty's hope couldn't jump yet. Vader's shuttle would reach them in seconds, and there was no way to fight the Dark Lord in the vulnerable moments before hyperspace, unless someone bought them time. "I'm going out there," Steve said, reaching for his shield. "Cap, that's suicide," Tony protested. "Vader will kill you." "Maybe." Steve headed for the airlock. "Or maybe I'll hold him off long enough for you to escape. Either way, the fleet survives. That's the mission. Then you don't go alone." Thor appeared beside him, Mjolnir in hand. "I have wanted to face this Dark Lord in single combat since we arrived. Now I shall have my chance. Make it 3. Natasha checked her weapons, knowing they'd be useless, but refusing to let her friends fight alone. "Though we're probably all going to die." 4. Clint pulled his last arrow, a special one he'd been saving, tipped with explosive compound, and a note that read, "From Earth, with love." 5. The Hulk shouldered through the corridor, his wounds already healing through gamma-powered regeneration. Hulk protect friends. Always. Tony looked at his team, his family preparing to sacrifice themselves so others could live. It was the most Avengers thing possible, and he hated it because it was right. 6, he said, his faceplate snapping down. "If we're doing this, we do it together. Jarvis, tell Raddus to jump the moment he can. Don't wait for us." They launched into space, 6 warriors from Earth, positioning themselves between the fleeing rebel flagship and Darth Vader's approaching shuttle. Through the viewport, they could see him, a figure in black armor, his cape flowing in artificial atmosphere, his presence somehow visible even across the void. The shuttle's door opened, and Vader simply stepped out into vacuum, protected by the Force. His lightsaber ignited a blade of crimson plasma that burned against the stars, and he began to walk across the void toward them, defying physics and sanity with every step. So, Vader's voice transmitted through their comms, somehow reaching them despite the vacuum. "You offer yourselves to save your allies. That is admirable, but ultimately futile. We've heard that before," Steve said, shield raised. "We're still here. Then let me correct that oversight." Vader raised his hand, and the Force reached out like an invisible fist. It caught all 6 Avengers simultaneously, holding them suspended in vacuum. Their movements locked as telekinetic power overwhelmed their resistance. "You fight with courage and skill," Vader said, walking closer. "But you are not Force users. You cannot comprehend the power you face. You are children playing at war, and this game." His fist clenched slowly, and they felt invisible pressure crushing them. Ends now. Behind them, the Liberty's Hope's hyperdrive engaged. The Mon Calamari cruiser jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Avengers alone with Darth Vader in the void between stars. The void of space was silent as Vader's telekinetic grip held the Avengers suspended like insects in amber. Steve struggled against the invisible force, every muscle straining, but it was like fighting gravity itself, impossible, inexorable. His shield floated uselessly beside him, torn from his grasp by the Dark Lord's will. "You cannot break free," Vader said, his respirator marking steady rhythm as he approached through vacuum. "The Force binds you more completely than any chains. You are mine." But Vader had made a critical miscalculation. He'd assumed the Avengers fought like everyone else in this galaxy, with predictable tactics, conventional thinking, and respect for established power hierarchies. He'd studied their combat patterns for 3 months, analyzed their strengths, prepared countermeasures for their abilities. What he hadn't prepared for was Tony Stark's suicidal creativity. Jarvis, Tony, transmitted on a frequency so tight even Vader's force-enhanced senses couldn't detect it. Emergency Protocol Omega. Execute now. Sir. That protocol will destroy your armor's structural integrity and leave you defenseless in hard vacuum. I know. Do it anyway. The arc reactor in Tony's chest overloaded deliberately, channeling all its energy into a single electromagnetic pulse. The EMP exploded outward, with enough force to disrupt electronics across a kilometer radius, and more importantly, it disrupted the exotic energy fields Vader was using to hold them. For just a fraction of a second, the telekinetic grip faltered. It was enough. The Hulk exploded forward with a roar that somehow carried through vacuum, his gamma-enhanced vocal cords producing vibrations that traveled through the thin hydrogen atoms scattered between stars. His massive fist caught Vader in the chest, and even Sith armor couldn't completely absorb the impact of a being who'd fought Thanos. Vader flew backward, tumbling through space, his lightsaber spinning away. He arrested his momentum through force powers, regaining control, but the Hulk was already following up. Green fists hammered into black armor, each blow carrying megaton-scale force. Thor recovered next, Mjolnir returning to his hand as lightning blazed around him. You speak of power, Sith Lord. I am the god of thunder, son of Odin, and I have fought demons that would make you flee in terror. Lightning erupted even in vacuum, drawn from the solar winds and cosmic radiation that filled space. It wasn't natural. It defied every law of physics in this galaxy, but Asgardian magic had never cared about galactic laws. The electricity struck Vader, and his armor sparked as systems overloaded. But Vader was no ordinary opponent. He was the chosen one, the most powerful Force user Anakin Skywalker had been before falling to darkness. Pain only fueled his power. He raised both hands, and Force lightning erupted, not the crude technique of the Inquisitors, but pure dark side energy channeled through decades of hatred and suffering. The lightning struck Thor, and even Asgardian durability had limits. The god of thunder screamed, electricity coursing through his body in ways that had nothing to do with his element and everything to do with dark side corruption. Steve, free from the telekinetic grip, used his suit's emergency thrusters to propel himself toward Vader. His shield returned to his hand, vibranium's unique properties making it immune to force manipulation, and he threw it with all his super soldier strength. Vader saw it coming through precognition. He deflected it with a gesture, except vibranium couldn't be deflected by the Force. The shield struck his helmet, cracking the faceplate further, and suddenly the Dark Lord was breathing vacuum through damaged life support. Vader's hand went to his helmet instinctively, and in that moment of distraction, Clint fired his special arrow. It struck Vader's chest plate and detonated not with conventional explosives, but with a shaped charge designed by Tony specifically to penetrate Imperial armor. The explosion didn't kill Vader, but it damaged him. His armor was breached in 3 places, life support failing, and the vacuum of space was doing what no enemy had managed in 20 years, actually threatening his life. But Darth Vader had survived worse. He'd burned on Mustafar, had his limbs severed, had been left to die by the man he'd called brother. Vacuum was just another form of suffering, and suffering was fuel for the dark side. He channeled the Force inward, using it to sustain his organs, to keep his blood oxygenated, to survive where survival should be impossible. And then he channeled it outward in a wave of telekinetic force that sent all 6 Avengers flying in different directions. Impressive. Vader's voice transmitted through comms, even as his helmet vented atmosphere. You have wounded me. No one has done that in years. But wounding and defeating are not the same. He recalled his lightsaber through the Force, the blade igniting as it returned to his hand. Then he moved, not walking, but flying through space on currents of Force energy, moving faster than human eyes could track. He appeared beside Natasha first. She tried to bring her weapon to bear, but he simply crushed it with telekinesis, then caught her in a Force choke. You fight with skill, assassin. But skill means nothing when your enemy can kill you with a thought. Natasha's hands clawed at her throat, even though there was nothing physical choking her. Her vision started to blur, oxygen deprivation setting in. The Hulk hit Vader like a gamma-powered meteorite, driving him away from Natasha. They tumbled through space, the Hulk's fists hammering into Vader's damaged armor, while the Sith Lord's lightsaber carved burning wounds across green skin. "Hulk, protect Natasha," the green giant roared. No one hurt Hulk's friends. Vader's lightsaber found a gap in the Hulk's defenses, plunging into his shoulder. The blade burned through muscle and bone, cutting deeper than any weapon should be able to penetrate gamma-enhanced tissue. But the Hulk's healing factor was already working, regenerating even as the lightsaber caused damage, and the pain made him angrier, stronger. The Hulk grabbed Vader's lightsaber arm and simply broke it. Armor crumpled, servos snapped, and the Dark Lord's arm bent at an angle arms shouldn't bend. His lightsaber drifted away, deactivating as it left his grip, but Vader still had one hand. He raised it, and force lightning erupted at point-blank range, channeled directly into the Hulk's skull. The electricity burned through the green giant's brain, causing damage even his healing factor struggled to repair. The Hulk's roar became a scream of pain. His grip loosened, and Vader pushed him away with telekinesis, then used the Force to recall his lightsaber to his remaining functional hand. Tony's armor was dying, its systems fried by the deliberate EMP and life support failing in the vacuum. But he had one weapon left himself. He activated the last of his thrusters and flew directly at Vader. No weapons, no defense, just a man in a broken suit trying to tackle a Sith Lord. "For Earth," Tony shouted, even though the comms were failing. "For everyone you've killed. For everyone who's ever stood up to tyrants like you." He slammed into Vader, his armor's remaining mass combining with his velocity to drive them both toward the nearby Relentless, the Star Destroyer they'd disabled. Now a drifting Hulk leaking atmosphere and debris. They struck the hull together, Tony's armor disintegrating on impact, leaving him in just the emergency suit that barely kept him alive. Vader's armor absorbed more of the impact, but even Sith engineering had limits. He lay in the crater their landing had created, his broken arm useless, his helmet compromised, his breathing ragged. Tony crawled toward him, his own body broken ribs cracked, one lung collapsed, but the arc reactor in his chest still glowing. "Not so scary when you're bleeding, are you?" Vader's remaining hand rose, trembling with effort. "You have courage, Stark, but courage is not enough." Force lightning gathered around his fingertips, weaker than before but still deadly. Tony had no shield, no defense, nothing but his determination and the rapidly fading hope that his sacrifice had given his team time to escape. Then Steve Rogers landed beside them, shield raised, having used the last of his suit's thrusters to reach the hull. The vibranium disc intercepted Vader's lightning, grounding it harmlessly. "It's never just about courage," Steve said, helping Tony to his feet. "It's about never giving up, never surrendering, and never—" He threw his shield, fighting alone. The shield struck Vader's helmet, and the already damaged faceplate shattered completely. For the first time, they saw what was beneath scarred tissue, burns covering every inch of visible skin, yellow eyes blazing with dark side corruption and bottomless pain. Vader's mask was gone. His breathing was desperate, unfiltered gasps as vacuum tried to claim him. He was dying, his life support completely failed, and even force powers had limits, but he smiled. A terrible, knowing smile. "You think you've won?" he wheezed. "You've played exactly as the Emperor predicted." Around them, space suddenly filled with Imperial ships. Not the 6 Star Destroyers from before, dozens of them, appearing from hyperspace in a coordinated arrival that spoke of perfect planning. The Executor led them, accompanied by interdictor cruisers that immediately began generating gravity wells, preventing any hyperspace escape. And on the Executor's bridge, Emperor Palpatine stood watching through the viewport, his hologram also appearing before the Avengers. "Well done," the Emperor's raspy voice carried across the comms. "You fought as predicted, sacrificed yourselves as predicted, and now, with your rebel fleet scattered and you isolated, we claim our prize." Specialized recovery shuttles launched from the Executor, each one carrying containment equipment and medical teams. They were coming to capture the Avengers, to study them, to break them. Thor appeared beside Steve and Tony, having fought his way through the vacuum. He was wounded, his armor cracked, but his eyes still blazed with determination. "Then we fight, here, now, to the last, against 40 Star Destroyers," Tony wheezed, blood leaking from his mouth. "I'm usually optimistic, but even I know when the math doesn't work." The Hulk crashed down beside them, having leaped across space from where Vader's attack had sent him. He was wounded worse than they'd ever seen, lightsaber burns covering his torso, one arm hanging limp, his healing factor struggling to keep up, but he was still standing. "Hulk not leave friends," he said, his voice a mixture of Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's rage. "We fight together, die together, if must." Natasha and Clint arrived moments later, using the last of their suit propulsion. They had no weapons left, no arrows, no ammunition, just determination and each other. The 6 Avengers stood together on the hull of a destroyed Star Destroyer, surrounded by an Imperial fleet, facing certain capture or death. They were battered, broken, bleeding in vacuum, their equipment destroyed, and their strength nearly exhausted. But they weren't surrendering. "Guess this is how it ends," Clint said, trying to sound casual despite the horror of their situation. "Never thought I'd die in space, but I've had worse Tuesdays. If we die here," Steve said, his voice carrying the weight of command and friendship, "we die as Avengers. We die having given everything to fight tyranny. That's worth something." "It's worth everything," Natasha agreed. The recovery shuttles were closing in, their tractor beams reaching out to capture the Avengers. On the Executor, the Emperor was already planning what he'd do with these powerful beings, study them, break them, perhaps even turn them to the dark side. Then space tore open. Not hyperspace, something else. Something that made reality scream. A dimensional rift appeared directly between the Avengers and the approaching Imperial fleet, its edges crackling with energy that had no place in this galaxy. And through it stepped someone they'd never expected to see. Dr. Stephen Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, floated through the rift in full regalia, the cloak of levitation billowing despite the vacuum, the eye of Agamotto glowing on his chest. Behind him, the rift showed not space but Earth specifically, the New York Sanctum Sanctorum. "Sorry I'm late," Strange said, his voice carrying through mystical means rather than technology. "Your quantum signature became traceable once Stark overloaded that arc reactor. Took me 3 months to triangulate across dimensional barriers, but," he gestured, and orange mandalas appeared around each Avenger, magical constructs that provided atmosphere and protection. "I'm here now." Steve stared in disbelief. "Strange? How?" "Long story. Short version. Wong's been monitoring dimensional anomalies since you disappeared. When I felt the Infinity Stone energy signature from your crash landing, I knew you were still alive, just somewhere else. I've been searching ever since." Strange looked at the Imperial fleet surrounding them. "Though I see you've made friends." The Emperor's hologram flickered with surprise, the first genuine emotion they'd seen from him. "What manner of sorcery is this? The kind from a dimension you've never touched," Strange replied. He turned to the Avengers. "I can take you home. Now. But only you. I can't transport anyone else, and the rift won't stay open long." Tony's mind raced through implications. "The rebellion. We'll have to manage without you," Strange said bluntly. "I'm sorry, but this is your one chance. The dimensional barriers are collapsing as we speak. It's now or never." Steve looked at his team. They were broken, bleeding, dying slowly in vacuum despite Strange's protective spells. Going home meant survival. Staying meant capture by the Empire and everything that came with it. But going home also meant abandoning the rebellion in its darkest hour. It meant every life they'd saved, every battle they'd won, every moment of hope they'd inspired would end with them fleeing when things got hard. The spy, Natasha said suddenly. Commander Tal, we captured him. He has intelligence on Imperial operations, deep cover agents, everything. If we leave him behind, then the Empire kills him and burns his intelligence, Clint finished. Everything we learned dies with us. Thor hefted Mjolnir, his decision already made. I will not flee. Honor demands I finish what I started. Honor's going to get you killed, Strange said. Or worse, captured and experimented on. The Empire won't just kill you. They'll spend decades studying you, breaking you, using everything they learn to oppress this galaxy more efficiently. Then we take Tal with us, Steve decided. Strange, can you transport one more person? Technically, yes, but then we get Tal, bring him to Earth, extract every bit of intelligence he has, and relay it back to the rebellion. We go home, but we don't abandon them completely. The Emperor, who'd been listening to everything through his agent's sensors, began to laugh. It was a terrible sound, full of malice and dark amusement. You think you can escape me so easily? You think I haven't prepared for every contingency? He raised his hands, and dark side energy raw, malevolent, the accumulated power of decades of Sith mastery erupted across space towards Strange's dimensional rift. The Force met mystical energy in a clash that had never occurred before in either reality. Strange's eyes widened. He's trying to corrupt the rift. If he succeeds, it'll collapse and trap you here permanently. How long can you hold it? Steve demanded. Maybe 2 minutes. But you need to get Commander Tal from wherever he's being held. Get back here, and get through before. I'll get him, Natasha said. I know where Tal was secured on the Liberty's Hope, and I can navigate that ship with my eyes closed. The Liberty's Hope is gone, Tony reminded her. It jumped to hyperspace, but its escape route is logged in my suit's memory, Natasha countered. Strange. Can your magic reach across hyperspace? I'm a sorcerer, not a hyperdrive, Strange said. But if you can provide exact coordinates, I might be able to create a secondary rift. Jarvis's voice crackled through the damaged comms, the AI still functional despite everything. I have the Liberty's Hope's last known trajectory. Transmitting to Dr. Strange now. Strange received the data and began conjuring another rift. This one smaller, more focused. It opened to show the interior of the Liberty's Hope, specifically the brig where Commander Tal was being held. The spy looked up in shock as an orange portal appeared in his cell. Your ride home just arrived, Natasha said, already moving toward the rift. Steve, get everyone ready to jump. I'll grab Tal and meet you at Strange's portal in 90 seconds. Natasha, Steve started. No time for arguments, Cap. Clock's ticking. She dove through the secondary rift, disappearing into the Liberty's Hope across impossible distances. The Emperor's dark side assault on Strange's primary rift intensified. The dimensional tear was starting to destabilize, its edges flickering as Sith power corrupted mystical energy. Strange gritted his teeth, his hands moving in complex patterns as he fought to maintain the portal. 1 minute, he said. That's all I can give you. Vader, still lying in the crater on the Relentless's hull, watched this all unfold with his damaged eyes. He was dying, truly dying this time, his body failing despite Force-sustained life, but he could still speak. Captain Rogers, he wheezed. Before you go, tell me, was it worth it? All this sacrifice? Steve looked at the Dark Lord who'd been their greatest enemy. Ask the people we saved. Ask the rebels who lived because we fought. They'll tell you it was worth it. Hope, Vader said, and something in his voice suggested the man beneath the armor, Anakin Skywalker, who'd once been a hero before falling to darkness. You fight for hope. I, once, believed in that. Before, he didn't finish. His remaining hand fell to his side, and the yellow faded from his eyes. Darth Vader, the Empire's greatest enforcer, the Sith Lord who'd killed thousands, died alone on a wrecked starship, his last words an echo of the man he'd once been. On the Executor, the Emperor felt his apprentice's death through the Force and smiled. So dies the Chosen One, and soon, so die his killers. Natasha emerged from the secondary rift, dragging Commander Tal, who was protesting and fighting. "Let me go. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand you're coming with us to face justice," Natasha said, her grip unbreakable. She dragged him towards Strange's main portal, where the other Avengers waited. 30 seconds, Strange warned, strain evident in his voice. "The Emperor's power is considerable. I can't hold much longer." The Imperial fleet was moving closer, specialized weapons charging devices designed to disrupt dimensional rifts, to prevent Force-sensitive beings from escaping through space-time manipulation. The Empire had been preparing for this possibility for years. Everyone through. "Now," Steve ordered. The Hulk went first, his massive bulk barely fitting through the rift. Thor followed, casting one last look at the galaxy he was leaving behind, a realm he'd fought for, bled for, and would never see again. Tony pulled himself through despite his injuries, Jarvis already compiled into a portable format that could transfer between realities. Clint and Natasha followed, dragging the protesting Tal. Steve was last. He stood on the threshold between dimensions, looking back at the Imperial fleet, at the rebellion scattered across the galaxy, at a war he'd fought with everything he had. "We'll send them what we can," he said to Strange. "Tal's intelligence, technology, everything we learned. They'll keep fighting." "I know," Strange said, "but we need to go. Now." The Emperor's final assault struck the rift. Dark side energy corrupted mystical constructs, and the portal began to collapse. Steve threw himself through, just as reality snapped shut behind him. They tumbled onto the floor of the New York Sanctum Sanctorum, breathing Earth's atmosphere for the first time in 3 months. Wong stood nearby, ready with medical supplies and a look of profound relief. "Welcome home," he said simply. Behind them, the dimensional rift sealed completely, cutting them off from the galaxy far, far away. From the rebellion they'd fought beside, from the war that would continue without them. Steve sat on the floor of the sanctum, still wearing the remnants of his spacesuit, and allowed himself one moment of weakness. They'd survived, they'd made it home, but it felt like running away. Like abandoning people who needed them. "Did we make the right choice?" he asked the silence. No one had an answer. Because sometimes, there was no right choice, just the one you could live with. And somewhere in another galaxy, Princess Leia stood on the Liberty's Hope's bridge, staring at the stars, knowing the Avengers were gone, knowing the rebellion had just lost its greatest symbols of hope, but also knowing that hope itself couldn't be killed by distance or dimensions. The Avengers had proven that tyranny could be fought, that the Empire could bleed. That was a lesson worth fighting for, even without Earth's mightiest heroes by their side. The Sanctum Sanctorum smelled of old books, incense, and Earth ascent the Avengers hadn't realized they'd missed until it filled their lungs again. For a long moment, no one moved. They lay where they'd fallen, battered and bleeding on the polished wood floor, breathing air that wasn't recycled through starship filters or shared through damaged spacesuits. Then the pain hit. Tony groaned, clutching his ribs. The Hulk's form shuddered, green skin receding as gamma radiation withdrew, leaving Bruce Banner curled on the floor, unconscious and covered in burns that were already fading from green to angry red. Thor sat up slowly, Mjolnir beside him, his divine blood gold and shimmering dripping onto Wong's carefully maintained floor. "Medical assistance is prepared," Wong said, his voice calm but his eyes taking in the extent of their injuries. "But first containment." He gestured, and mystical bands of golden light wrapped around Commander Tal, who had been struggling to his feet. The spy froze, his eyes wide with terror and confusion. "Where is this? What have you done?" "You're on Earth," Natasha said, rising with the fluid grace of a dancer despite the vacuum burns on her skin. And you're going to tell us everything you know about Imperial operations, deep cover agents, and whatever else you've been feeding Palpatine. I'll die first. Maybe. Natasha's smile was cold. But I've interrogated aliens, gods, and robots. You're just a man with a cause. We'll break you. Stephen Strange hovered slightly above the floor, the cloak of levitation adjusting around his shoulders. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but his gaze was sharp. The dimensional barrier is sealed, but it was damaged by that dark energy. I felt it a corruption, a kind of mystical poison. The Emperor's power isn't just political or technological, it's metaphysical. It touched the fabric between realities. Can he follow us? Steve asked, already thinking defensively. Unlikely. But the tear I opened left a scar, and scars can be reopened under the right conditions. Strange descended to the floor, the eye of Agamotto glowing softly on his chest. More immediately, you all need medical attention. And debriefing. Wong, prepare the containment room, the one with the dimensional dampeners. Already done. As Wong and Strange helped the wounded Avengers to their feet, Bruce stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Did we make it? We're home, Bruce, Clint said, offering a hand. Somehow. Home, Bruce repeated, and there was a hollow note in his voice. He looked around the sanctum, then at his own hands, human again, but trembling. What about the others? The rebellion? No one answered. The silence was answer enough. 2 days passed. The Avengers recovered in the Sanctum's infirmary, a room that blended ancient herbal remedies with mystic healing spells and, at Tony's insistence, some shield-grade medical technology Strange had acquired. Their injuries were severe but survivable: broken bones, radiation burns, vacuum exposure, psychological trauma. Thor's Asgardian physiology healed fastest. Bruce's transformations had left him with accelerated regeneration but also lingering gamma instability. Tony's arc reactor had been damaged, and Strange had to use a containment spell to keep the shrapnel from reaching his heart while repairs were made. Commander Tal was held in a cell that existed between dimensions, a place where time moved differently and escape was impossible. Natasha and Clint began the interrogation, but it was slow going. Tal was a true believer, a man who saw the Empire not as tyranny but as necessary order. He'd been planted before the Death Star's construction, his entire life rebuilt to serve Palpatine's vision. On the third day, Steve gathered the team in the Sanctum's library. They wore borrowed clothes, simple robes and tunics, and looked like shadows of the heroes who'd left Earth. But their eyes were clear, and their determination was undimmed. We need to decide our next move, Steve said. We're home, but we left a war unfinished. We have intelligence that could save lives. We have a responsibility. We also have a responsibility here, Tony countered, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. He was working on a portable device, a combination of Stark tech and sling ring principles to access Tal's memories without torture. Earth's had its own problems while we were gone. There are whispers, enhanced incidents, unexplained energy signatures. We vanished for 3 months. That doesn't go unnoticed. Then we split our focus, Natasha said. We extract Tal's intelligence, find a way to send it back, and then deal with whatever's happening here. Send it back how? Clint asked. Strange says the dimensional barrier is damaged. We can't just open another portal without risking the Emperor corrupting it, or worse, following us. There may be another way. Stephen Strange entered, holding an ancient tome bound in what looked like dragon hide. I've been researching the energy signature the Emperor used. It's not just dark side force power, it's something older, something that taps into the fundamental corruption of reality. The Sith have been studying dimensional physics longer than anyone realized, but their understanding is blunt. A hammer where we need a scalpel. He opened the book to a page showing intricate diagrams of multiversal layers. The barrier between our reality and theirs is thin where we tore through. thin enough that we might be able to send information through without reopening a full portal. A data stream, encoded in quantum particles, directed to a specific receiver. "You're talking about a cosmic email," Tony said, intrigued despite himself. "How? The Eye of Agamotto can manipulate time and space on a micro scale. If I focus its power, I can create a temporary quantum entanglement between particles here and particles there. We encode Tal's intelligence into the entanglement, then send a burst through the thin point in the barrier. The rebellion would need a receiver capable of detecting quantum state changes, something sensitive to midichlorian fluctuations, maybe." "The Force," Thor said, understanding dawning. "You would use the Force as the carrier wave." "Essentially, yes. But it would require someone on the other side who is both Force-sensitive and technically skilled enough to build the receiver, and we'd have to send them the instructions first." "Leia," Steve said immediately. "She's Force-sensitive, she's brilliant, and she's leading the rebellion. If anyone can do it, she can." "But how do we send her the instructions without sending the data stream?" Bruce asked, his scientist's mind engaging despite his fatigue. "It's a chicken and egg problem." "Not necessarily." Tony's eyes lit up with that familiar spark of genius. "We send the instructions via a simpler method, something low-tech, low-energy, that won't attract the Emperor's attention. Something like a focused radio wave encoded with binary, aimed at a specific point in space-time where we know the rebellion will be. They're constantly moving," Natasha reminded him, "but they have patterns, fallback points, rendezvous coordinates we memorized." Tony stood, pacing. "Jarvis, you still have all the Rebel fleet's emergency rally points, yes?" Jarvis's voice emerged from a temporary speaker Strange had conjured. "I do, sir. 17 possible locations, each with a time window for usage. The next viable window opens in 4 days, at a set of coordinates in the outer rim, then we target that. We send a tight beam transmission containing schematics for the quantum receiver. Leia gets it, builds it, and then we send Tal's intelligence through the quantum entanglement. It's risky," Strange said. "The transmission could be intercepted. The Emperor's fleet monitors all frequencies. We'll encrypt it with something he can't break, a combination of stark ciphers and mystical encodements. You and Wong work on the magic side. I'll handle the tech." Steve looked around the room, seeing agreement on every face. "Then we have a plan, but we need to move fast. Every day we delay, the Empire tightens its grip." The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. Tony and Strange worked in tandem, a collaboration of science and sorcery that would have been unthinkable before the invasion of New York. Tony built a quantum encoder using parts cannibalized from his damaged armor and components Wong retrieved from other dimensions. Strange and Wong prepared the mystical side, warding the transmission against dark side interception, weaving spells of misdirection and encryption that would make the message appear as cosmic background radiation to anyone without the proper key. Natasha and Clint continued interrogating Tal, but they shifted tactics. Instead of threats, they used psychology, appealing to the man's hidden doubts, showing him holo recordings, recreated by Jarvis, of Imperial atrocities, of worlds glassed by the Death Star, of children suffering under Imperial rule. They broke him not by force, but by forcing him to see the truth of what he served. On the second day, Tal cracked. He began talking, and once he started, he couldn't stop. Names, dates, locations, deep cover agents in the Rebel Alliance, Imperial security codes, planned operations, the location of hidden shipyards, research facilities, even the private frequencies used by the Emperor's inner circle. Jarvis recorded everything, cross-referencing and building a database that was more comprehensive than any the rebellion had ever possessed. Meanwhile, Bruce and Thor worked on the transmission array itself. Thor's control over lightning allowed them to generate precise energy signatures, while Bruce's understanding of gamma radiation helped shield the signal from dimensional interference. They built the device in the Sanctum's courtyard, a strange amalgamation of rune-covered stones, repulsor tech, and a focusing crystal Strange had borrowed from the London Sanctum. On the third day, as they were testing the alignment, A tremor passed through the sanctum. Not physical, something deeper. A vibration in reality itself. Strange's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Something's trying to reach through. From the other side. The Emperor? Steve asked, shield already in hand. No, this is different. Softer. A calling. Strange closed his eyes, his hands moving in a complex pattern. The eye of Agamotto opened, and a green light filled the room. In its glow, they saw a vision fragmented, fuzzy, but unmistakable. Princess Leia, standing on the bridge of the Liberty's Hope. She was holding something, a small device, cobbled together from spare parts. And she was reaching out, not with her hands, but with her mind. The Force, flowing through her, seeking something across an impossible distance. She's trying to contact us, Strange said, awe in his voice. She's using the Force to ping the dimensional scar. She knows we're still out here. Can we answer? Tony asked. Not yet, but soon. The transmission window opens in 18 hours. We'll need to send the instructions then. But there's something else in the vision. The image shifted, showing not just Leia, but others, Luke Skywalker, training with a lightsaber on a swampy world. Han Solo and Chewbacca, smuggling supplies through Imperial blockades, the rebel fleet, regrouping, repairing, preparing for a new offensive. And behind it all, a shadow, a presence of immense dark power, watching, waiting. The Emperor knows she's trying to reach us, Strange said. He's allowing it. He's using her as bait. Then we can't respond, Clint said. It's a trap. We have to, Steve insisted. This might be our only chance to get them the information. We just have to be smarter than the trap. They spent the final hours perfecting the plan. The transmission would be sent in 2 parts first. The schematics for the quantum receiver, encrypted and buried in a seemingly innocent data burst about stellar radiation. Second, 24 hours later, the full intelligence dump via quantum entanglement, using the receiver Leia would hopefully have built. The risk was enormous. If the Emperor intercepted the first transmission, he'd not only learn about the quantum receiver but could use it to trace the second transmission back to Earth. If he did that, he could theoretically reopen the dimensional rift, or worse, send something through. But the alternative was leaving the rebellion blind, with a spy's treasure trove of intelligence locked in a basement on Earth while people died across the galaxy. At the appointed time, they gathered in the courtyard. The transmission array hummed with power, Tony's arc reactor feeding energy into Strange's mystical circuits. Thor stood ready to channel lightning if needed. Bruce monitored the gamma shielding. Natasha and Clint kept watch on the perimeter, though what they were watching for, none of them knew. Ready? Strange asked, his fingers poised over the final rune. Do it, Steve said. Strange activated the array. There was no flash of light, no roar of energy, just a subtle vibration that passed through the fabric of reality. The transmission, encoded and encrypted, shot into the dimensional thin spot, aimed with impossible precision at the coordinates where the rebellion would be in exactly 6 hours. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the array sparked, and a feedback wave knocked them all off their feet. From the speaker, they heard a voice, not Leia's, not any voice they recognized. It was ancient, rasping, and full of malicious amusement. I have been waiting for you. The Emperor's image flickered in the air above the array, holographic but somehow present. He was not on a starship bridge, he sat on a throne in a dark chamber, his yellow eyes glowing in the shadows. You thought you could hide in another dimension. You thought you could escape, but the dark side sees all, reaches all. Cut the transmission, Tony yelled. I can't. He's locked onto it. You have something I want, the traitor's knowledge. And I have something you want, the survival of your rebel friends. So I propose a trade. The image shifted, showing the Liberty's Hope surrounded by Imperial star destroyers. Not in battle formation, in siege formation. The rebel ship was trapped, its engines dead, its shields failing. In 12 hours, I will destroy this ship and everyone on it. Unless you return, Surrender yourselves to me, and I will let the rebels go. A simple exchange, your lives for theirs. Steve stepped forward, his face set in grim lines. We don't negotiate with tyrants. Then they die, and their blood will be on your hands, Captain. You could have saved them. You chose to run. The transmission cut, leaving them in silence. The array smoked, its circuits fried. They'd sent the schematics, but the Emperor had hijacked the signal. He knew they were listening. He knew they cared, and he'd set a deadline, 12 hours. He's lying, Natasha said immediately. He'll kill them anyway. Probably, Steve agreed. But we can't risk it. We have to warn them. How? The array is destroyed. Not the array, Strange said, rising to his feet. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with determination. Me. I can project my astral form across the dimensional barrier. It's risky if the Emperor detects me. He could trap my consciousness there, or worse. But I can reach Leia, warn her, give her the schematics directly. And if he catches you, Bruce asked, then you'll need to find a new Sorcerer Supreme. Strange's smile was grim. But I've faced worse than a Sith Lord in dark space. He didn't wait for agreement. He sat in a meditation pose, and his astral form slipped free of his body, a silvery, translucent version of himself that hovered for a moment, then shot upward, vanishing through the ceiling and, presumably, through dimensions. They stood guard over his body, the silence heavy with tension. 12 hours, a deadline across realities. A choice they'd already made once, to leave, now being thrown back in their faces. We're not going back, Tony said quietly. We can't. Even if we wanted to, the dimensional barrier is too damaged. Strange said it himself. Then we find another way, Steve said. We're Avengers. We don't abandon people, even when they're in another galaxy. Especially then. The wait was agonizing. Minutes ticked by with no sign of Strange's return. Wong maintained a protective circle around the Sorcerer Supreme's body, chanting softly. The rest of them paced, planned, argued. After 2 hours, Strange's astral form slammed back into his body with a gasp. He collapsed forward, blood trickling from his nose. He sensed me, but not before I reached her. Leia has the schematics. She's building the receiver now, and she knows about the trap. Will she be ready in time? Steve asked. She'll have to be. But there's more. Strange looked up, his eyes haunted. The Emperor isn't just blockading the Liberty's hope. He's built something, a weapon that amplifies dark side energy. He's planning to use it to tear open the dimensional rift permanently. Not just to reach us, but to infest our reality with the dark side. To conquer Earth, as he conquered the galaxy. The room went cold. When? Tony asked. Soon. He's waiting for something, a planetary alignment, a surge in dark side power. But once he has it, he'll rip reality open. And he'll send not just troops, but the essence of the dark side itself. It will corrupt everything it touches. Steve met the eyes of his team, one by one. Then we have 2 missions, save the rebellion and protect Earth. And we have to do both with one shot. How? Clint asked, though he already knew the answer. We use the quantum entanglement. We send Tal's intelligence, yes. But we also send something else. A counter-weapon. Something that can disrupt the Emperor's dark side amplifier. We have about 10 hours to build a dimensional disrupting superweapon, Tony said. No pressure, but he was already moving toward the workbench, ideas sparking behind his eyes. Bruce joined him, and Thor offered his strength. Natasha and Clint began preparing for whatever might come through if the Emperor attacked early. Wong and Strange started weaving the most powerful protective wards the Sanctum had ever seen. They were Avengers. They'd fought aliens, robots, and gods. They'd fought in a galaxy far, far away. And now they'd fight across dimensions to save both. The clock was ticking. The Sanctum Sanctorum became a war room. Blueprints and holograms covered every surface. stark tech schematics overlapped with ancient mystical diagrams. Tony and Bruce worked at a feverish pace, their hands moving in sync as they built something that had never existed before. "We need a resonant frequency that matches the dark side energy signature but inverted," Bruce muttered, his fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. "If the Emperor's weapon amplifies corruption, we need to broadcast its opposite." "Hope?" Clint asked from where he was calibrating arrowheads with enchanted tips. "More like coherent light side energy. But we don't have the Force here." "No," Strange said, hovering nearby as he consulted a floating tome. "But we have something analogous. The mystic arts draw from dimensions of pure energy, the same energies that fuel the light side of the Force in their reality. If we can create a bridge between those dimensions and channel that energy through the quantum entanglement, then we send the Emperor a care package of pure, uncorrupted cosmic goodness," Tony finished. "He'll hate it. Let's call it the Sunshine Special." The device taking shape on the workbench was an elegant nightmare of mixed technologies. At its core was a modified arc reactor. Stripped of its housing and wrapped in bands of Uru metal Thor had summoned from Asgard's vaults. Around that, Strange and Wong had inscribed containment runes in liquid starlight, a substance that existed only in the space between dimensions. Wires of vibranium, borrowed from Steve's shield's backup supply, connected it all to a focusing crystal that pulsed with soft white light. "The problem isn't building it," Bruce said, wiping sweat from his brow. "The problem is powering it. To generate enough counter-energy to disrupt a dark side amplifier that's drawing power from an entire galaxy, we'd need a source bigger than anything on Earth." "Not on Earth," Thor said, his voice rumbling with certainty. He placed Mjolnir on the workbench beside the device. "The hammer contains the power of the storm, the raw, unshaped energy of creation. It is the heart of Asgard's might. It could power your device." Tony stared at him. "You'd give up Mjolnir? To save 2 realms?" "Without hesitation. But that is not all that is needed." Thor looked at Strange. "The Eye of Agamotto holds the power of time itself, and the arc reactor contains the heart of a star. Combined, they might be enough." Strange's hand went to the eye at his chest. "Using the eye for anything other than its intended purpose is dangerous. It could unravel time in this vicinity." "We're talking about saving realities, Stephen," Wong said quietly. "Sometimes risks must be taken." The debate raged for precious minutes, but in the end, they all knew there was no other way. The device, dubbed the Beacon, would be powered by 3 impossible energy sources: Asgardian storm power, the Time Stone's infinite potential, and a miniaturized star's heart. The combination was volatile enough to destroy the Sanctum and half of New York if it failed. While the beacon took shape, Natasha and Clint prepared the intelligence package. Jarvis had compressed Tal's data into a quantum codex, a stream of information so dense that a single second of transmission contained more data than all the libraries on Earth. They loaded it into the transmission array alongside the beacon's activation sequence. 8 hours until the Emperor's deadline, Steve announced, watching the countdown Jarvis displayed. "How long until the beacon is ready?" 3 hours, maybe 4, Tony said, not looking up from his soldering. "But we need to test it." "Test it how?" "We can't exactly fire a burst of light side energy through Manhattan. We'll need a containment field," Strange decided. "I'll create a pocket dimension, a bubble of reality where we can test without endangering ours." He began the complex gestures to open a pocket dimension, his hands weaving patterns in the air that left glowing trails. A doorway of shimmering orange light appeared in the center of the room, showing a featureless white void inside. "Bring the beacon," Strange said, strain evident in his voice. "Quickly. I can't hold this open long." Thor lifted the device. It was about the size of a basketball, humming with contained power, and carried it through the portal. Tony and Bruce followed with monitoring equipment. The rest watched from the threshold. Inside the pocket dimension, physics behaved differently. Sound didn't carry. Light bent in strange ways. Tony set up the sensors while Bruce made final adjustments to the beacon's harmonics. "Ready?" Tony asked. "Do it." Bruce said. Thor placed Mjolnir against the beacon's power input, and the hammer began to glow. Lightning crawled up its handle and into the device. Strange, still maintaining the portal with one hand, used the other to tap the eye of Agamotto. A beam of green time energy joined the lightning. Finally, Tony activated the arc reactor core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the beacon ignited. Light poured from it, not blinding, but soft, warm, and pervasive. It filled the pocket dimension, and as it did, they felt a change, a sense of peace, of clarity, of hope so tangible it was almost painful. The light washed over them, and for just a second, every doubt, every fear, every shadow in their hearts was gone. "Wow," Clint whispered from the portal. The light intensified, focusing into a beam that shot toward the far wall of the pocket dimension. Where it struck, the white void rippled, and something dark and twisted that had been lurking there, a fragment of nightmare that had slipped into the pocket dimension, dissolved with a soundless scream. "It works," Bruce said, awe in his voice. "It really works." "Shut it down," Strange ordered. "The energy signature is attracting attention." Tony killed the power, and the light faded. But as it did, they all saw cracks spreading through the pocket dimension's walls, reality itself strained by the beacon's output. "Get out, now," Strange shouted. They scrambled back through the portal just as the pocket dimension collapsed in on itself with a sound like shattering glass. The orange doorway snapped shut, and Strange staggered, catching himself on a bookshelf. "That was too close," he breathed. "But it worked. The beacon can generate coherent light-side energy." "At what cost?" Wong asked, helping him to a chair. "You're drained, and the device is unstable. It can only be used once before the energy sources destabilize completely. Once is all we need," Steve said. "We fire it through the quantum entanglement at the same time we send the intelligence. It disrupts the Emperor's amplifier, maybe even damages his weapon, and gives the rebellion a fighting chance." "And then?" Natasha asked. "What about Earth? If the Emperor's still out there, and he knows we attacked him, then we'll be ready," Steve said. "But first things first, we have to save the Liberty's hope." The next hours passed in focused silence. Final calibrations were made. The beacon was mounted to the rebuilt transmission array, its deadly, hopeful payload aimed at the dimensional thin spot. Tal's intelligence was encoded and loaded. All that remained was the wait. With 2 hours left until the Emperor's deadline, Jarvis spoke up. "Sir, I'm detecting anomalous energy readings from the dimensional scar. Something is pushing through." On the main monitor, a visual representation of the barrier between realities appeared. A bulge was forming, like a blister on the fabric of space-time. Dark energy pulsed within it. "He's trying to open the rift early," Strange realized. "The planetary alignment must be happening sooner than we thought." "Can we stop it?" Steve asked. "Not from here, but we can fire the beacon now, disrupt his attempt. It'll mean sending the intelligence blind layer might not have the receiver ready yet." "It's that or let him open a door to Earth," Tony said grimly. "We have to risk it." Steve looked at his team, seeing the same resolve in every face. "Then we do it. Fire the beacon." They took their positions. Thor stood by Mjolnir, ready to channel power. Strange hovered with the eye of Agamotto open. Tony stood at the controls, Bruce beside him monitoring the energy flow. Natasha and Clint manned defensive positions around the sanctum, though what good conventional weapons would do against a dimensional incursion, none of them knew. "On my mark," Steve said. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Thor slammed Mjolnir into the beacon. Lightning erupted. Strange directed the Time Stone's energy into the mix. Tony activated the arc reactor at maximum output. The beacon glowed, then shone, then became a miniature sun in the center of the sanctum. The light built, focused, and then with a sound like a choir of angels fired, a beam of pure white energy shot from the beacon, through the transmission array, and into the dimensional thin spot. Reality tore, but not with the corruption of the dark side. This was a clean, precise cut, a surgical strike across dimensions. They watched on the monitors as the beam traveled. For a moment, they saw the other side, the Liberty's Hope, surrounded by Imperial ships, with a massive, spider-like space station behind them glowing with dark side energy. The Emperor's weapon, the beacon's beams, struck the center of that darkness. On the other side, chaos. Aboard the Liberty's Hope, Princess Leia had just finished building the quantum receiver, a jury-rigged device of crystal circuits and gutted droid parts. She felt the beacon's energy arrive an instant before she saw it. A wave of light, pure and unconquerable, washed over the Imperial fleet. The dark side amplifier, the space station known as the Eclipse, shuddered as coherent light side energy tore through its systems. Corruption met purity, and for a moment they cancelled each other out. Then the amplifier overloaded. Dark side energy, suddenly without a container, exploded outward. Imperial ships caught in the blast had their systems fried, their crews driven mad by the backlash of corrupted force energy. The Eclipse itself cracked open like an egg, vomiting darkness into space. On the Executor, Emperor Palpatine felt the attack. He had been channeling his power into the amplifier, ready to tear open the dimensional rift and claim Earth for his empire. The beacon's strike hit him like a physical blow. For the first time in decades, the Emperor knew pain. Not physical pain, something deeper. The light side energy scoured his connection to the dark side, temporarily severing his grip on the Force. He screamed, a sound of pure rage that echoed through the Force across light years. But Palpatine was no ordinary Sith. He had survived worse. He drew on deeper reserves of hatred, on the accumulated suffering of a galaxy, and fought back. Dark side energy met light side energy in a clash that twisted reality around them. Aboard the Liberty's Hope, Leia saw her chance. The Imperial blockade was in disarray. The interdictor fields had failed. All ships jumped to hyperspace. Now, the Rebel fleet, what remained of it, engaged their hyperdrives. One by one, they vanished into safety. But Leia hesitated. She looked at the quantum receiver, which was now blinking, receiving the data stream from Earth. Tal's intelligence, everything they needed to fight back, was pouring in, and with it came a final message, encoded in the data stream's header. A voice. Steve Rogers' voice, strained but clear. Leia, this is Captain Rogers. We can't come back, but we're sending you everything we have. Use it. Fight. And know that somewhere out there, you have friends who believe in you. May the Force be with you. Leia's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. She opened a channel to the fleet. We have it. All of it. The Empire's secrets. Now we use them. On Earth, the Avengers watched the Liberty's Hope jump to safety, just as the dimensional tear, destabilized by the energy clash, began to collapse. We did it, Bruce breathed. The backlash hit. The beacon, having channeled impossible energies, could not contain them. Cracks spread across its surface. The arc reactor core went critical. Get down, Tony shouted. The beacon exploded. But it wasn't a conventional explosion. It was a release of unfocused dimensional energy. The blast wave didn't destroy matter, it unraveled it. Books in the library turned to clouds of words that hung in the air before dissipating. Stone walls became sand, then dust, then memories of stone. Strange threw up a shield, containing the worst of the effect, but the sanctum was damaged. The dimensional wards were broken, and the tear between realities, weakened by the clash, began to widen. Through it, they saw the Emperor's throne room. He was wounded, smoke rising from his robes, but he was alive, and he was looking right at them. You, his voice hissed across dimensions. You dare strike at me? You dare defy the dark side? He raised his hands, and dark side energy gathered not to attack, but to stabilize the tear, to lock it open. He's creating a permanent bridge, Wong cried. We have to seal it, Strange responded, already weaving spells. But the Emperor's power was too great. Even wounded, even weakened, He was a black hole in the Force, and his will was bending reality to his purpose. The tear widened, becoming a gateway. Through it, they could see Imperial troops gathering, not just stormtroopers, but dark side adepts, inquisitors, things that were more shadow than substance. Avengers, Steve shouted. Defensive positions. They formed up before the gateway, weapons ready. But how do you fight an enemy that can corrupt reality itself? The first Inquisitor stepped through the seventh sister, her lightsaber spinning. She saw the Avengers and smiled. The Emperor's prizes. Come to us willingly, or we will drag you through. Thor stepped forward, lightning crackling around Mjolnir. You shall not pass. The battle that followed was unlike any they'd fought before. It wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical. The Inquisitors fought with lightsabers and force powers, but the dark side energy spilling through the gateway was changing the environment. Shadows came alive, reaching for the Avengers with cold fingers. The very air tasted of ozone and decay. Steve fought with shield and strength, but his vibranium disc could only block so much. Natasha and Clint's weapons were useless against force barriers. Bruce tried to transform, but the Hulk wouldn't emerge. The dark side energy was suppressing gamma radiation. Only Thor and Strange could fight on equal footing. Lightning against force lightning, mystical shields against telekinetic assaults. But they were outnumbered, and the gateway was widening. Tony, his armor still damaged, did the only thing he could think of. He flew straight at the gateway, not to attack, but to analyze. Jarvis, scan the tear's structure. Find a weakness. Scanning. Sir, the gateway is being held open by a feedback loop between dark side energy and dimensional instability. To close it, we need to disrupt that loop. How? An equal and opposite energy burst from this side, but we no longer have the beacon. Then we make one. Tony looked at the arc reactor in his chest, the one that had been damaged, repaired, damaged again, the one that kept him alive. Jarvis, calculate the yield if I overload the reactor and direct the blast into the gateway. Sir, that would. Just calculate it. The explosion would be sufficient to disrupt the feedback loop for approximately 3.2 seconds, long enough for Dr. Strange to seal the gateway. But you would not survive the overload. Tony looked at the battle raging around him, his friends fighting for their lives, his world about to be invaded by an evil from another galaxy. He remembered Yinsen in a cave in Afghanistan, telling him not to waste his life. He remembered Peter Parker looking up at him with hero worship. He remembered Pepper waiting for him to come home. Some prices were worth paying. Tell Pepper I love her, Tony said quietly, and tell the team it was worth it. He turned to fly toward the gateway, ready to make the sacrifice play one final time. But Steve Rogers grabbed his arm. No, not you. Cap, there's no time. We do this together. Steve looked at the others. All of us. We channel everything we have into one attack. Our strength, our power, our will. We hit the gateway with everything, all at once. Maybe it's enough. They gathered Steve, Tony, Thor, Bruce, Natasha, Clint, Strange, even Wong. They stood in a circle, facing the widening gateway, the dark side spilling through like smoke. On 3, Steve said. 1. Thor raised Mjolnir, lightning gathering. 2. Strange opened the eye of Agamotto, time energy swirling. 3. They unleashed everything. Thor's lightning, Strange's mystic bolts, Tony's repulsors at maximum, Steve's shield thrown with all his strength, Clint's last enchanted arrow, Natasha's widow's bite overloaded. Bruce, finally pushing through the suppression, let the Hulk emerge just enough to roar a gamma-charged blast of sound. And Wong, chanting in a language older than civilization, wove their attacks together into a single spear of multicolored energy. It struck the gateway. Light met darkness. Reality screamed, and for a moment, everything was white. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but something deeper, a stillness that felt like the moment between heartbeats when all of existence holds its breath. The white faded slowly, resolving into the familiar, damaged interior of the Sanctum Sanctorum. The Avengers stood where they had made their final stand, weapons still raised, breathing heavily. Before them, where the dimensional gateway had been tearing reality apart, there was now only a faint shimmer in the air, like heat haze over asphalt. "It's closed," Stephen Strange whispered, his voice raw with strain. He lowered his trembling hands. The eye of Agamotto on his chest dimmed, its light retreating behind the metal casing. "The gateway is sealed." Tony Stark's armor gave one last spark and went completely dark. He stumbled, the servos locking up, and would have fallen if Steve Rogers hadn't caught him. "Easy, Tony. Did it work?" Bruce Banner asked. He was fully human again, kneeling on the floor with his glasses askew, the green tint gone from his skin. The Hulk had retreated, exhausted. Clint Barton lowered his bow, the string slack. He looked around at the devastation. The Sanctum's library was in ruins, books scattered and torn, mystical artifacts cracked or melted. "We're alive. The gateway's gone. I'm calling that a win." But Natasha Romanoff, ever the pragmatist, was already moving toward the spot where the gateway had been. She extended a hand toward the shimmering air. "It's cold, like space." "It's a scar," Wong said, joining her. He passed his own hand through the area, his fingers tracing patterns only he could see. "The dimensional barrier healed, but it's thin here, vulnerable." Thor set Mjolnir down with a heavy thud. The hammer seemed dimmer, its usual constant hum of power reduced to a faint vibration. "The Emperor felt our combined strike. I sensed his fury across the void. He is wounded, but not defeated. That's a problem for another day," Steve said, helping Tony to a chair. "Right now, we need to assess the damage and make sure nothing else came through before we sealed it." They spent the next hour securing the Sanctum. Strange and Wong worked to reinforce the dimensional scar, weaving new wards and protections that glowed with soft golden light. The other Avengers tended to their injuries and took stock of their situation. They were alive. That was the first miracle. The Liberty's hope and the Rebel fleet had escaped. That was the second. Earth was safe. For now, that was the third. But the cost was written in the exhaustion on their faces and the wreckage around them. Tony's armor was beyond repair, a museum piece of twisted metal and dead circuits. Thor's connection to Mjolnir seemed weakened, as if the hammer had poured too much of itself into the final blast. Strange was pale and shaking, the use of the Time Stone having taken a toll even the Sorcerer Supreme wasn't immune to. And then there was the intelligence they'd sent. "The data from Commander Tal, Jarvis," Tony said, tapping at a portable tablet he'd salvaged. "Do we have confirmation that the transmission was received?" "Affirmative, sir. The quantum data stream was fully transmitted before the gateway collapsed. I am receiving a confirmation ping from the Rebel receiver, a repeating binary signal based on the encryption key Princess Leia provided." On the tablet screen, a simple message appeared, decoded from the signal. "Data received. Gratitude. Hope endures. Leia." Steve read the message and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. She got it. They have everything they need. "It doesn't mean they'll win," Bruce said quietly. He was staring out a cracked window at the New York skyline, his reflection showing a man haunted by two monsters, one green, one galactic. "The Empire is huge. They have thousands of ships, billions of troops. One data packet, no matter how comprehensive. It gives them a chance," Natasha said. "That's more than they had yesterday," Clint nodded. "And we gave it to them. That's what matters." But the victory felt hollow in the quiet of the damaged Sanctum. They had saved the rebellion, maybe. They had saved Earth, probably. But they had also created a permanent vulnerability, a thin spot in reality that led straight to a galaxy ruled by a dark side emperor who now knew exactly where they lived. "Strange," Steve said, turning to the sorcerer. "How do we protect Earth from this?" The Emperor knows we're here now. He'll try again. Strong finished placing the last ward and leaned against a bookcase, breathing heavily. The scar is stable for now. I've layered it with every protection I know: misdirection, reflection, absorption. If he tries to open another gateway here, he'll find it difficult, but not impossible. So we stay vigilant, Thor declared. He hefted Mjolnir, and a spark of lightning danced up his arm. Asgard stood guard against cosmic threats for millennia. Now Earth must do the same. And we will, Steve said. He looked at each of them, his team, his family. But we can't do it alone. We need to rebuild. We need to prepare. And we need to decide what we tell the world. The world isn't ready to know there's a Sith Lord in another dimension who wants to conquer us, Tony said flatly. We keep this quiet. For now, they agreed. The events of the past days would be classified, known only to them and a select few Fury. If he was still around, Hill, maybe Pepper, and a handful of others they trusted with the fate of the planet. But as they began the long process of cleaning up and repairing, a question hung unspoken in the air. What about the rebellion? What about the war they had left behind? 2 days later, the Avengers were back at the rebuilt Avengers Tower. Damage from the dimensional incursion had been explained away as a contained energy experiment gone wrong. The press bought it, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. Tony had a new arc reactor in his chest and was already sketching designs for Mark LXVI. Bruce was in his lab, running tests on his own blood, trying to understand why the Hulk had been suppressed by dark side energy. Thor had returned to Asgard to consult with his father about the nature of dimensional barriers and the threat of the dark side. Natasha and Clint were going over S.H.I.E.L.D. files, looking for any historical references to other dimensional incursions or energy signatures matching the Emperor's. They found hints, whispers in ancient texts, unexplained events in the 1,940 seconds that matched some of the energy patterns, but nothing definitive. Steve was in the gym, pounding a heavy bag with a rhythm that spoke of frustration rather than training. He'd saved the day, again. But it felt different this time. They'd left people behind. Good people, fighting a war they'd promised to help win. Still brooding? He turned to see Natasha leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. Not brooding, thinking. About Leia? Han? The rebellion? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. They're not your responsibility, Steve, she said, her voice softer than usual. We did what we could, more than anyone could have asked. I know, but that doesn't make it sit right. He stopped punching the bag and faced her. When we fought in World War II, we didn't leave until the job was done. We didn't get to go home because things got tough. We didn't have a choice this time. The gateway collapsed. We were stranded here. Were we? Steve asked, and the question hung between them. Or did we take the first chance to come home when it was offered? Natasha was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "You think we should have stayed? I think we made a choice to save ourselves instead of seeing it through to the end. And I don't know if that's the kind of heroes we want to be." Before she could answer, Jarvis's voice filled the room. "Captain Rogers, you have an incoming priority transmission. Origin encrypted. But it matches the quantum signature of the rebel receiver." Steve and Natasha exchanged a look, then hurried to the common room. The others were already gathering as a holographic projector activated. The image that appeared was fuzzy, distorted by distance and dimensional interference, but recognizable. Princess Leia Organa, looking older and warier than they remembered, but with the same fire in her eyes. "Captain Rogers, Avengers, if you're receiving this, then our test transmission has succeeded." Her voice was clear, though it crackled with static. "We've analyzed the data you sent. It's extraordinary. We've already exposed 3 deep-cover Imperial agents and prevented attacks on 4 rebel cells. You've given us a fighting chance." She paused, and her expression grew grim. "But the war is far from over. The Emperor survived your attack. He's angry, and he's turning that anger on the galaxy. Systems that were neutral are being occupied. Rebellions are being crushed. The Death Star may be gone, but he's building something worse. We don't know what yet, but the data you sent points to projects in the unknown regions. Leia leaned closer to the hologram recorder. I'm not asking you to come back. I know you can't, but if there's any way, any advice, any technology, any hope you can send, we need it. The darkness is spreading, and we're running out of time. The transmission ended, leaving them in silence. Well, Clint said after a moment, that's not ominous at all. Tony was already pulling up star charts and data files. The unknown regions, that's the wild space beyond the outer rim. If Palpatine's building something out there, it's big and bad. We have to help them, Steve said. It wasn't a request, it was a statement of fact. How? Bruce asked. We can't open another gateway. Strange said it was too dangerous. Then we find another way. Steve looked at Tony. You built a dimensional gateway once. Can you build another? One that's safe? Controlled? Tony shook his head. The first one almost killed us, and it required exotic matter that only exists in their galaxy. Without that, it's impossible. Nothing's impossible, Thor said, entering the room. He'd returned from Asgard, and he carried with him an ancient-looking scroll. My father has consulted the archives of the 9 realms. There is a legend of a bridge between worlds that does not tear, but bends. The Bifrost. The Bifrost was destroyed, Steve remembered, rebuilt, and improved. Heimdall believes that with the right coordinates and a sufficient power source, the Bifrost could reach across dimensions, not to travel physically, that would still be too dangerous, but to communicate, to send gifts. Gifts? Natasha raised an eyebrow. Knowledge, technology, perhaps even small devices. Thor unrolled the scroll, showing diagrams that were part engineering schematic, part mystical rune. The Bifrost channels the power of the Space Stone. It can create a tunnel through reality that is stable, if temporary. Steve's mind was racing. So we could send them supplies, weapons, medical technology, anything that could help. But not us, Bruce clarified. Not people, not yet, Thor agreed. But in time, perhaps. The Bifrost was never meant for dimensional travel, but the theory is sound. It would require calibration, testing. And if it goes wrong? Clint asked. What if we open another door for the Emperor? Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong. Tony was already excited, the engineer in him seeing the challenge. We build safeguards, deadman switches. We make sure the connection only goes one way, and only when we initiate it. It was a risk, a huge one. But looking around the room, Steve saw the same determination he felt. They'd left a job unfinished. They'd left friends behind. This was a chance to make it right. We'll need Strange and Wong, Natasha said, and we'll need to keep this completely off the books. If the wrong people find out we're building an interdimensional bridge, they won't, Steve promised. This stays with us. We do this quietly. We do this right. And we give the rebellion the tools they need to win their war. They spent the next week planning. Strange and Wong returned to the Sanctum to work on the mystical components. Tony and Bruce designed the technological interface. Thor consulted with Asgard's finest engineers. Natasha and Clint began assembling a care package. Everything from advanced medical supplies to schematics for energy weapons that would work in the Star Wars galaxy. But the more they worked, the more they realized the scope of what they were attempting. This wasn't just sending a box of supplies. This was establishing a permanent, if limited, connection between two realities. The implications were staggering. What happens if the rebellion wins? Bruce asked during one late-night planning session. What happens if they overthrow the Empire? Do we just cut the connection, leave them to rebuild on their own? Or what happens if they lose? Clint countered. What if the Emperor finds out about the Bifrost Bridge and uses it to attack us? There are no easy answers, Steve admitted. But that doesn't mean we don't try. We do the good we can, with the means we have. That's all we've ever done. The breakthrough came on the 10th day. Tony and Strange had been arguing for hours about power modulation when Wong, who had been silently meditating in the corner, spoke up. "The eye of Agamotto sees all of time," he said, his eyes still closed. "It shows me a possibility. Not a certainty, but a possibility. The bridge can be built. It will hold, but it will attract attention. Not from the Emperor, from something else. Something older." They all turned to him. "What kind of something?" Tony asked. Wong opened his eyes. "The Force is not just light and dark. There are things in between, beings that exist in the cosmic balance. Our bridge will be a thread between realities. They will see it. They may try to pluck it." "Fantastic," Clint muttered. "So we're not just risking an Imperial invasion, we're risking attack by cosmic force entities. Anyone else want to add to the list of potential apocalypses?" But the work continued. Because what else could they do? They were Avengers. They saved people. All people, even those in galaxies far, far away. The day of the test arrived. They had built the bridge interface in a secure, remote facility that Tony owned, a repurposed satellite launch site in the middle of nowhere. The device was a beautiful, terrifying blend of Asgardian crystal, mystic runes, and stark technology. At its heart was a focusing lens made from vibranium and uru metal, designed to channel the Bifrost's energy into a coherent beam. Thor stood ready with Heimdall on the other end of an Asgardian communication spell. Strange and Wong had woven protective wards around the entire facility. The other Avengers were at their stations, monitoring every possible variable. "Ready when you are. Point break," Tony said, his fingers hovering over the activation console. Thor raised Mjolnir to the sky. "Heimdall, open the Bifrost." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a column of rainbow light descended from the heavens, striking the focusing lens. The device hummed to life, energy crackling across its surface. "Channeling the Bifrost," Tony reported, his eyes glued to the readouts. "Power levels stable, dimensional coordinates locked. Opening bridge, now." The lens focused the rainbow light into a narrow beam that shot into empty air. Where it struck, space bent, then twisted, then opened. Not a tear, a gentle folding. A doorway of shimmering light appeared, and through it, they could see stars, different stars. "It's working," Bruce whispered. "We have a connection." On the other side, the view shifted, resolving into the interior of a rebel frigate. Princess Leia stood there, surrounded by her command crew, her eyes wide with shock and hope. "Avengers," she said, her voice clear through the bridge. You found a way." "A temporary one," Steve responded, stepping forward. "We can't send people, but we can send help. Are you ready to receive?" Leia nodded, recovering her composure. "We are. And we have something for you as well, a token of our gratitude." A small crate was pushed through the bridge from the rebel side. It appeared on their end, materializing from the light. Tony opened it cautiously. Inside were data crystals, samples of advanced alloys, and a handwritten note from Leia. But at the bottom of the crate was something else, a lightsaber. Not a Jedi weapon, but something new, built with both rebel and alien technology. A note attached read, "For when you need a little extra light." "They're sending us weapons?" Clint asked. "They're sending us hope," Steve corrected. He picked up the lightsaber. It felt strange in his hand, both familiar and alien. He didn't activate it, but he could feel a hum of energy within. On the other side, the Avengers began sending their care package crates of supplies, data drives, medical equipment, all passing through the bridge in a steady stream. The rebels watched in awe as technology from another reality arrived to aid their fight. But as the transfer continued, Wong's warning proved true. The bridge began to vibrate, not with instability, but with something else, a presence. Shadows gathered at the edges of the light doorway. Not Imperial, something else, something ancient and hungry. "Something's coming through," Natasha warned. weapons drawn. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was neither Imperial nor Rebel. It looked almost like a Jedi, but wrong. Its form shimmered, half substantial, and its eyes glowed with cold white light. The thread between worlds, it whispered, its voice echoing in their minds rather than their ears. A new path. We shall walk it. Strange stepped forward, his own magic flaring. You are not welcome here. This bridge is closed to you. All bridges are ours to walk. We are the Bendu. We are the balance. The being the Bendu reached a ghostly hand toward the bridge, trying to widen it, to make it permanent. He's trying to claim the bridge, Tony shouted. Shut it down. But shutting it down would strand the supplies on the rebel side, incomplete. They had to finish the transfer. Avengers, Steve called. Protect the bridge. Buy us time. They fought not with fists or weapons, but with will. The Bendu was a force entity, and it attacked not physically but metaphysically. It tried to unravel their reality, to fold space around them, to trap them in moments of time. Strange and Wong fought back with magic, Thor with lightning. The others could only stand their ground, their minds assailed by visions of a galaxy in balance, of a path between light and dark, of a choice that wasn't a choice at all. Join the balance, the Bendu offered. Reject the extremes. In the middle there is peace, but Steve Rogers had never been good at standing in the middle. We choose our own path, he said, and activated the lightsaber Leia had sent. The blade sprang to life, not blue, not green, but pure white. It cut through the Bendu's illusions like a hot knife through butter. The entity recoiled, surprised. That blade, it should not exist. Transfer complete, Tony shouted. Closing the bridge, Steve swung the white lightsaber one final time, and the Bendu withdrew, fading back into the shadows between realities. The bridge of light collapsed gently in on itself, sealing the connection. They stood in the silent facility, breathing hard. The Bendu was gone. The transfer was complete. The bridge was closed. On the table before them, the lightsaber deactivated with a quiet hum. Well, Clint said, breaking the silence. That was new, but they had done it. They had sent help to the rebellion. They had established a connection, however temporary. And they had learned something important. They were not alone in the multiverse. There were other powers, other beings, other wars. Steve looked at the lightsaber in his hand, then at his team. We'll need to be ready. The Emperor won't give up. And now, neither will we. They had become more than Earth's mightiest heroes. They had become guardians of two worlds, and their war was just beginning. 6 months. That's how long the Avengers kept the secret. 6 months of rebuilding, planning, and preparing for a threat that might never come or might come tomorrow. The Bifrost Bridge experiment was never repeated. The risk was too great. The attention it drew too dangerous. Wong's warning about the Bendu and other cosmic entities had been proven true, and Strange had counseled against further interdimensional contact unless absolutely necessary. But the connection, however brief, had changed everything. The supplies and technology sent to the rebellion had made a difference. Through careful, encrypted microburst transmissions sent via quantum-entangled particles, a method Strange developed that left no dimensional scar, they received sporadic updates. The rebellion was growing stronger. The intelligence from Commander Tal had allowed them to dismantle Imperial spy networks, ambush supply convoys, and liberate 3 entire star systems. But the Empire was adapting. Emperor Palpatine, enraged by the Avengers' interference and the theft of his secrets, had unleashed a new wave of terror. The Galactic Civil War had entered its bloodiest phase. On Earth, life went on. The Avengers handled local threats, enhanced criminals, alien artifacts, the usual chaos of a world protected by superheroes. But there was a new tension in the air, a sense that they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. Tony Stark had rebuilt his armor, incorporating elements of the technology Leia had sent. The Mark Lex had a secondary power source based on kyber crystal resonance, and its repulsors could now fire concentrated plasma bursts, that bore an uncomfortable resemblance to blaster fire. He'd also begun work on something he called the Dimensional Anchor, a device designed to permanently stabilize Earth's reality against external incursion. Bruce Banner had made a breakthrough with the Hulk. The suppression he'd felt from the dark side energy had given him an idea. If external energy could suppress the transformation, perhaps internal focus could control it. He was training with Strange, using mystical meditation techniques to find balance between man and monster. Progress was slow, but for the first time, there was hope for true control. Natasha and Clint had taken it upon themselves to prepare Earth's defenses. They'd compiled dossiers on every enhanced individual, alien contact, and advanced technology on the planet. If the Empire came, they wanted to know who could fight and what they could fight with. Thor split his time between Earth and Asgard, consulting with his father and the other realms about the nature of dimensional threats. Odin had confirmed the existence of other realities and the dangers of crossing between them. The 9 realms were now on alert, their armies ready for a war that could come from beyond the stars or beyond reality itself. And Steve Rogers, Steve trained. He studied the white lightsaber Leia had sent, not to become a Jedi, but to understand its principles. He read the data crystals she'd included, learning about the Force, the history of the Jedi and Sith, the philosophy of a galaxy he'd fought in but never truly understood. He felt a responsibility not just to Earth, but to the people they'd left behind, to Leia, Han, Luke, and all the rebels fighting a war with the tools he'd sent. He also kept the lightsaber a secret from the world. Only the Avengers knew it existed. In his private quarters, he would sometimes activate it, watching the pure white blade hum to life, casting a soft glow in the dark. It was a symbol of hope from another galaxy, and a reminder of a promise unfulfilled. The peace, such as it was, shattered on a Tuesday. The alert came from the Sanctum. Strange's voice was tight with urgency over the secure comms. Everyone to the Sanctum, now. We have an incursion. And it's not the Empire. They arrived within minutes. The Sanctum's library was intact this time, but the air crackled with unstable energy. In the center of the room floated a shimmering, shifting portal, not the violent tear of the Emperor's attempts, nor the controlled bridge of the Bifrost. This was something else. It looked like a pool of liquid silver, and through its surface they could see not stars or ships, but a barren, rocky landscape under a blood-red sky. "What is that?" Tony asked, his armor already assembled. "A dimensional vortex," Strange said, his hands moving as he tried to contain it. "But it's not originating from the Star Wars galaxy. This is a third reality. Something is calling through. Calling for what?" Natasha had her weapons drawn, though she knew they'd be useless against a hole in reality. "Help? Or a herald? I can't tell." Strange gritted his teeth. "The vortex is anchored to a life force, a powerful one. It's trying to pull something through from our side." As if on cue, the vortex pulsed. A wave of energy washed over them, and with it came a voice, not in their ears, but in their minds, deep, resonant, filled with ancient power and profound loneliness. "Who fights the long war? Who stands against the dark that consumes all? Answer. Prove your worth." The voice was accompanied by images, flashes of a cosmic struggle on a scale they could barely comprehend. Galaxies dying, reality unraveling, a shadow so vast it blotted out stars, and against that shadow, a single figure, clad in armor of light, fighting a battle that had lasted eons. "Okay, new rule," Clint said, nocking an arrow. "No more answering mysterious cosmic calls. It never ends well." But Steve was already stepping forward. He felt something a pull, not from the vortex, but from the lightsaber at his belt. The white blade was humming, vibrating in sync with the portal's pulses. It recognizes the energy, Steve realized. The lightsaber. It's reacting to whatever's on the other side. "That's not a good thing," Tony warned. Before anyone could stop him, Steve drew the lightsaber and activated it. The white blade blazed to life, and the vortex reacted immediately. It stabilized, the silver surface becoming mirror-smooth, and in that mirror, they saw not the barren landscape, but a figure. He was tall, clad in ornate armor that seemed both ancient and advanced. His face was hidden behind a helmet that was neither Imperial nor Mandalorian. It was something else entirely. In his hands, he held a weapon that was part staff, part blade, glowing with the same white light as Steve's lightsaber. You bear the light of other world walkers. How came you by this? The voice was still in their minds, but now it was focused, directed at Steve. It was a gift, Steve answered aloud, from friends in another reality. Who are you? I am the last warden of the Eternal Empire. For 10,000 years, I have held the line against the void. But the darkness grows. The balance shifts. I have sensed disturbances in the fabric of reality, tears, bridges, scars. You are the source. Not by choice, Tony said. We were defending our reality from an invasion, from the dark side of the Force. Yes, I know their stench. Their master seeks to consume all realities, to bend the multiverse to his will. He has already corrupted worlds beyond count. Steve's blood ran cold. The Emperor? He's trying to conquer other dimensions? He has begun. And he has succeeded in 3. I have seen their stars go dark. He now turns his gaze to your reality and mine. We stand on the same front line, though separated by infinite voids. Strange move to stand beside Steve. What do you want from us? An alliance. The forces of the void are beyond any single reality's power to resist. Alone, we will fall. Together, we might hold. I can open a path, a true bridge, not a tear, but I require an anchor on your side, a beacon of light to guide the way. And if we say no? Natasha asked. The Imperial dropships landed in a storm of dust and dark side energy. From their ramps descended not just purge troopers, but something new, tall, skeletal droids with glowing red eyes and weapons that hummed with corrupted power. Dark troopers, Luke identified, his face pale. Phase 3. I've only heard rumors. They're supposed to be unstoppable. Nothing's unstoppable, Steve said, raising his shield. Xylon, can you hold the portal open and fight? The portal must remain. Without it, Master Skywalker is trapped here. I will hold it. You must hold them. The dark troopers moved with unnerving silence, their metallic feet crunching on the barren ground. They raised their weapons, not blasters, but devices that fired concentrated beams of dark side energy. Scatter! Tony yelled, as the first beams lanced out. The Avengers separated, using the ruins for cover. The energy beams tore through stone-like paper, leaving smoking craters where they hit. Conventional weapons aren't working, Clint called out, his explosive arrows detonating against a dark trooper's chest with no effect. Then we get unconventional. Tony flew straight up, then dove, slamming into a dark trooper with his full weight and repulsor boost. The droid staggered but didn't fall, grabbing Tony's leg and hurling him into a collapsed wall. The Hulk roared and charged, meeting a dark trooper fist to fist. The impact echoed like a thunderclap. For a moment, the two titans were locked in struggle, gamma-enhanced muscle against durasteel and dark side power. Then the dark trooper's other hand came up, firing a point-blank energy blast into the Hulk's chest. The green giant flew backward, crashing through 3 ancient pillars. "Bruce!" Steve shouted. But there was no time to check on him. More dropships were arriving, and from the largest emerged a figure in black robes, not Vader this time, but someone else. A tall, pale man with yellow eyes and a cruel smile. He carried no visible weapon, only a staff topped with a pulsating red crystal. An Emperor's hand, Luke breathed. One of his personal agents. They're said to be nearly as powerful as Vader. The hand stepped forward, his staff leaving scorch marks on the ground. "The Emperor offers you one final chance," he spoke, his voice silky and malignant. "Surrender the Warden and the Jedi. Submit to the dark side. Your world will be spared when the void consumes all. Steve stepped forward, shield raised. We don't surrender, then you die. The hand raised his staff, and dark side energy exploded outward in a wave. The Avengers were thrown back, their minds assaulted by visions of despair, of Earth conquered, of the rebellion crushed, of realities falling one by one to endless darkness. Even Steve, with his unwavering will, felt doubt creep in. What if they couldn't win this? What if the darkness was too strong? Then he heard a voice, not in his ears, but in his memory. Peggy Carter, back in the war. You don't win wars by wondering if you can. You win them by deciding you will. And Bucky, before the fall. I'm with you to the end of the line. And Sam, in the present. You're not just a soldier, Steve. You're a symbol. And symbols don't fall. Steve Rogers stood up. The dark side energy still swirled around him, but it couldn't touch him now. Because Captain America wasn't just a man, he was an idea. And ideas are bulletproof. He raised the white lightsaber, and it blazed with light that cut through the darkness like a sunrise. Avengers, he called, and his voice carried across the battlefield. Remember who we are. Remember why we fight. One by one, they rose. Tony pushed himself out of the rubble, his armor cracked but his arc reactor blazing. Yeah, okay, let's finish this. Thor stood, Mjolnir crackling with lightning that was now pure gold. For Asgard, for Midgard, for all the realms, the Hulk emerged from the debris, larger than before, his eyes glowing with green fire. Hulk, strongest there is. Natasha and Clint stood back to back, weapons ready despite knowing they were outmatched. They didn't fight because they thought they could win. They fought because it was right, and Luke Skywalker joined them, his green lightsaber humming beside Steve's white one. The Force is with us, he said. All of us. Xylon, still holding the portal open, sent a pulse of energy through the ground. The light of Zakuul awakens. Use it. The ancient ruins began to glow not with dark side energy, but with the accumulated light of millennia of guardianship. The light flowed into the Avengers, augmenting their strength, their courage, their very essence. The Emperor's hand sneered. A pretty light show, but light always fades. Darkness is eternal. He attacked. What followed was not so much a battle as a collision of fundamental forces. Light against dark, hope against despair, freedom against tyranny. Steve and Luke fought side by side, their lightsabers moving in perfect harmony. White and green blades against the red energy of the hand's staff. Where they struck together, the dark side energy shattered like glass. Tony and Thor took on the Dark Troopers, using combined attacks, lightning-charged repulsor blasts, Uru metal against Durasteel. The droids were powerful, but they weren't creative. They couldn't adapt to the unpredictable synergy of science and divinity. The Hulk smashed through their ranks, his rage now focused, controlled, channeled by Bruce's intellect and the light of Zakuul. He didn't just destroy the Dark Troopers, he dismantled them, tearing them apart with terrifying precision. Natasha and Clint handled the Purge Troopers, using the terrain and their unmatched teamwork to take down soldiers who outgunned and outnumbered them. They fought not to win, but to buy time, and sometimes, buying time is the greatest victory of all. The battle turned when Xylon made his move. Still maintaining the portal, he channeled his own power, the accumulated strength of 10,000 years of guardianship, into a single, focused beam of white energy. It struck the Emperor's hand just as Steve and Luke landed simultaneous blows with their lightsabers. The hand screamed, a sound of pure agony and shock. His staff shattered, his connection to the dark side severed. He collapsed, his body turning to dust before it hit the ground. With their leader gone, the Imperial forces faltered. The Dark Troopers shut down, their programming interrupted. The Purge Troopers, suddenly ordinary soldiers again, surrendered or fled. On the Executor, the Emperor watched the defeat with cold fury. He could send more forces, he could come himself, but the seal was already strengthening. The light of Zakuul now, augmented by the light of Earth and the light of the Jedi. It was a setback. Not a defeat, but a significant one. He gave the order to retreat. As the Imperial ships jumped to hyperspace, the Avengers gathered around Xylon, who finally allowed the portal to close. You have done what no others could. You have turned back the darkness not just with power, but with unity. Steve, breathing heavily, looked at his team. They were battered, bruised, but unbroken, and they had saved not just one world, but the integrity of the multiverse itself. What happens now? Luke asked. Now, you return to your worlds, but the connection remains. The alliance is forged. When the darkness comes again, and it will, you will not face it alone. Xylon placed a hand on Steve's shoulder, and on Luke's. You are both wardens now, not of Zakuul, but of the light itself. Protect it. Cherish it. Spread it. The warden opened a new portal, this one leading back to Earth. Go. Your worlds need you, and we will speak again. One by one, the Avengers stepped through, returning to the Sanctum. Luke went last, carrying with him the white lightsaber and a new understanding of what the light side truly meant. They had faced the darkness together, across realities, and they had won, not by being the strongest, but by being united. And in that unity, they had found a power greater than any the dark side could muster, the power of hope. The blood-red sky over Zakuul turned black as Imperial star destroyers blotted out the dying sun. The Executor hung in low orbit like a dagger aimed at the planet's heart, its sheer size distorting the horizon. From its belly, dropships descended, not the standard Lambda-class shuttles, but modified assault craft bristling with weapons and armored in black. They followed the energy signature, Tony realized, his armor's sensors overloading with readings. When Xylon opened the path to Dagobah, he lit a beacon. The Emperor has been searching for the seal, Xylon confirmed, his mental voice grim. He knows its power. He means to break it and claim the void for himself. Luke Skywalker, still disoriented from his cross-dimensional journey, ignited his green lightsaber as the first dropships landed. Stormtroopers in specialized armor poured out, their white plastoid replaced with black, their helmets marked with red sigils. These were not ordinary troops, they moved with unnatural coordination, their weapons humming with dark side energy. Purge troopers, Luke identified, falling into a defensive stance. Elite forces trained to hunt Jedi. But there are so many. Avengers, Steve shouted, raising his shield. Defensive formation. Protect Xylon and the temple. They formed a circle around Xylon, who was maintaining the golden portal to Dagobah. The portal flickered, keeping it open, while the Emperor's fleet generated a powerful dark side interference field, was draining the Warden's strength. I cannot hold the path much longer. If it collapses with Master Skywalker here, he will be trapped between realities. We're not losing anyone today, Steve promised. He turned to Luke. You said you need the light side to strengthen the seal. What do we do? Luke closed his eyes, reaching out with the Force. His face tightened with concentration and pain. The darkness here, it's suffocating, but I can feel it, the seal beneath the temple. It's like a wound in reality, and the dark side is infection trying to get in. We need to cleanse it. But I can't do it alone. The darkness is too strong. Then you won't be alone. Steve activated the white lightsaber. The blade blazed to life, its pure light pushing back the shadows that had begun to gather around them. We fight together, like we did on Yavin. The first wave of Purge troopers attacked. They moved with mechanical precision, their enhanced armor deflecting blaster bolts, and their weapons firing bolts of crimson energy that sizzled through the air. Natasha and Clint's conventional weapons were nearly useless, arrows shattered against armor, bullets melted before impact. We need to change tactics, Natasha called, ducking behind a fallen column as crimson bolts tore through the stone. I'm on it. Tony launched into the air, his repulsors flaring. He targeted the trooper's leader, a commander with a double-bladed electro-staff. Jarvis, analyze their armor. Find a weakness. Scanning. The armor is plated with cortosis weave, sir, highly resistant to energy weapons. However, the joints appear vulnerable to kinetic impact. Steve, they can't take energy, but they can take a punch. Understood. Steve charged forward, shield leading. He crashed into the front line of purged troopers, his super soldier strength sending them flying. His shield smashed through armor at the joints, and the white lightsaber in his other hand cut through weapons and limbs with shocking ease. The kyber crystal within resonated with Luke's green blade, their combined light creating a bubble of safety in the growing darkness. Thor summoned a storm, but the lightning that usually answered his call came weakly, crackling with dark side interference. This world rejects my power. The darkness here is ancient, and it hates the storm. Then we make our own lightning, Bruce shouted. He had been holding back, trying to maintain control. But as a purged trooper leveled a weapon at Natasha, something snapped. Hulk, help friends. The transformation was faster than ever, a green explosion of muscle and rage. The Hulk didn't just grow. He seemed to absorb the ambient gamma radiation of this dead world, becoming larger, greener, his eyes blazing with internal light. He grabbed a purged trooper in each hand and slammed them together with a sound like cracking mountains. But for every trooper they defeated, 3 more took their place, and the dropships kept coming. On the Executor's bridge, Emperor Palpatine watched the battle through a holographic display. He stood not at the command console, but in a meditation chamber deep within the ship, surrounded by Sith artifacts that glowed with stolen light. His face, usually hidden beneath a hood, was exposed ancient, scarred, and twisted with dark side corruption. Lord Vader's failure has been corrected, he whispered to the empty air. The Avengers escaped once. They will not escape again. And the seal, the power of the void, will be mine. He raised his hands, and dark side energy flowed from him, through the ship and down to the planet below. The very ground of Zakuul began to crack, black tendrils of corruption spreading toward the Temple of the Void. On the battlefield, Xylon staggered as the dark side surge hit him. He attacks the seal directly. I must reinforce it. The warden turned toward the temple, but a new threat emerged from the largest dropship. Not troopers, inquisitors. 7 of them, led by a figure they'd hoped never to see again, Darth Vader. But this was not the Vader they had fought in space. His armor was repaired, yes, but it was also changed, emblazoned with new sigils, crackling with dark side energy that made the air around him boil. In his hand, his red lightsaber burned with a malevolent fire. Vader, Steve breathed, but we saw you die. Death is a concept the dark side has transcended. Vader's voice boomed in their minds, deeper and more corrupted than before. The Emperor has gifted me with true power, power beyond your comprehension. He raised his hand, and Steve was lifted into the air, an invisible fist crushing his armor and grinding his bones. The white lightsaber fell from his grip, deactivating as it hit the ground. Hulk, smash! The green giant charged, but Vader simply gestured, and the Hulk was thrown backward through 3 ancient pillars, buried under tons of stone. Luke Skywalker stepped forward, his green blade held high. Vader, I can feel the conflict within you. The light still. There is no light. Vader's shout was a wave of force that knocked Luke off his feet. There is only power. And today, I will claim the power of the void. The 7 Inquisitors spread out, surrounding the Avengers. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and losing ground fast. Xylon was on his knees, pouring all his energy into holding the seal against the Emperor's assault. The golden portal to Dagobah flickered wildly if it collapsed now. Not only would Luke be trapped, but Yoda and any other help from that galaxy would be cut off forever. Tony fired every weapon he had at Vader, but the Dark Lord deflected the blasts with casual sweeps of his lightsaber. We need a new plan, and we need it now. Natasha, bleeding from a gash on her forehead, crawled to where Steve lay gasping. She pressed a stim pack from her belt against his neck, rebel medical technology she'd kept from their time in that galaxy. "Get up, Captain. We're not done yet." Steve groaned, his ribs knitting back together. He looked at the white lightsaber on the ground, then at Luke, who was locked in a desperate telekinetic struggle with Vader. Green lightning met red as their wills clashed. And then Steve remembered something Leia had said in her last transmission. "The lightsaber we sent you isn't just a weapon. It's a key, a focus for the light side that exists in all realities. A key." Steve grabbed the white lightsaber and forced himself to his feet. "Xylon, you said we need light from multiple realities to strengthen the seal. What if we give it more? What if we give it light from our reality too? It is possible. But the light must be pure, unshaken. It must be the essence of hope itself." Steve looked at his team, at Tony, who had built a suit of armor in a cave with a box of scraps to fight for what was right, at Natasha, who had turned from an assassin to a protector, at Clint, who had never stopped believing in second chances, at Bruce, who carried a monster inside him but always chose to be a man, at Thor, a god who fought for mortals, and at Luke, a farm boy who was trying to save a galaxy. He looked at the white lightsaber in his hand, and he understood. "It's not about the weapon," Steve said, his voice gaining strength. "It's about us, who we are, what we fight for. That's the light. That's what we need to give." He raised the lightsaber high, not as a weapon, but as a beacon. "Avengers, remember why we fight. Remember everyone we've saved, everyone we've lost. Remember that no matter how dark it gets, we never give up. We never surrender. And we never stop fighting for what's right." As he spoke, something began to happen. The white lightsaber glowed brighter. Then Tony's arc reactor blazed with blue-white light. Thor's Mjolnir crackled with lightning that was pure gold, not the storm grey of before. Even the Hulk, digging himself out of the rubble, began to glow with a soft green light that was different from his usual gamma radiation. This was the light of Banner's unwavering compassion, of his endless fight to protect others. The light spread, connecting them a web of pure energy that had nothing to do with the Force or magic or technology. It was the light of heroism, of sacrifice, of hope. Luke felt it too. He broke his struggle with Vader and stood, joining the circle. His green lightsaber blazed brighter, and for the first time, Vader hesitated. "What is this?" the Dark Lord demanded. "What's sorcery?" "Not sorcery," Steve said, his voice echoing with power. "Truth." The light coalesced, flowing into the white lightsaber, which was now shining like a star. Steve pointed it not at Vader, but at the Temple of the Void. "Xylon. Now. Now," the Warden agreed. Steve, Tony, Thor, Hulk, Natasha, Clint, Bruce, and Luke, all of them channeled their light, their hope, their very essence, through the white lightsaber and into the temple. A beam of pure white energy shot forth, striking the black stone structure. Where it hit, the darkness recoiled. The cracks in the ground began to seal, the black tendrils withering away. On the Executor, Emperor Palpatine screamed in rage and pain. "No, the seal is being reinforced. I will not be denied." He poured all his dark side power into a counter-strike, a wave of pure corruption that slammed into the Avengers' light. The two forces met in a cataclysmic clash that tore the sky apart. For a moment, it was stalemate. Then Steve Rogers did what he always did. He took the lead. He stepped forward, breaking from the circle, carrying the white lightsaber and all the light of the Avengers with him. He walked toward the temple, toward the heart of the darkness, with Vader and the Inquisitors between him and his goal. "Out of my way," Steve said, and his voice was quiet but carried the weight of worlds. Vader raised his lightsaber. "You die here, Captain." "No," Steve said. "I live, and I fight, and I win." He didn't run. He didn't charge. He walked. And as he walked, the light around him grew until he was impossible to look at directly. Vader attacked, his red blade moving faster than human eyes could follow. Steve didn't block with his shield. He didn't block at all. He simply walked through the attack, The red lightsaber passed through him without effect, because Steve Rogers in that moment wasn't just a man, he was an ideal, and you can't kill an ideal with a weapon. Vader stared in disbelief as Steve walked past him, past the Inquisitors, who were backing away from the light as if it burned them. He walked all the way to the Temple of the Void and placed the white lightsaber against its black stone door. "Be sealed," Steve whispered. "Be healed. Be whole." The light exploded, not outward, inward, into the temple, into the seal, into the very fabric of reality. The dark side energy emanating from the temple vanished. The cracks in the ground healed. The black tendrils turned to dust, and the seal glowed with a soft, steady white light that pulsed like a heartbeat. On the Executor, the Emperor's connection was violently severed. He fell to his knees, blood trickling from his nose and eyes. Impossible. They can't have. The light, it burns. The Imperial forces, suddenly without the dark side energy that had been enhancing them, faltered. The Purge troopers' coordination broke. The Inquisitors' powers weakened. The Avengers didn't waste the opportunity. They attacked as one, driving the Imperial forces back to their dropships. Thor's lightning returned at full strength, and he called down a storm that destroyed 3 landing craft. The Hulk smashed troopers into the ground. Tony targeted the engines of the remaining dropships, disabling them. Vader stood alone, watching as his forces retreated. He looked at Steve, who had retrieved the white lightsaber from the temple door. The weapon was still glowing, but softer now. "You. What are you?" Vader asked, and for the first time, there was something in his voice besides hatred. Something like awe or fear. "I'm just a kid from Brooklyn," Steve said, "who believes that light will always win over darkness, no matter how long it takes." Vader stood there for another moment, then turned and boarded the last dropship. It lifted off, joining the retreating Imperial fleet. The Executor and its escorts jumped to hyperspace, leaving Zakuul behind. The battle was over. The Avengers gathered around Steve, who was leaning on his shield, exhausted. The white lightsaber was still in his hand, its light slowly fading to a soft glow. Xylon approached, his armor scarred, but his stance strong. "The seal is secure, stronger than it has been in millennia. You have bought reality a reprieve, but not a permanent victory," Luke said, looking up at the stars where the Imperial fleet had vanished. "The Emperor will be back, angrier, more determined. Then we'll be ready," Steve said. He looked at the white lightsaber, then offered it to Luke. "This belongs to your galaxy. You should have it." Luke took it, feeling its weight. "It feels different now, lighter, brighter. It has absorbed the light of your reality as well," Xylon explained. "It is now a bridge between worlds, a symbol of the alliance you have forged today." Steve nodded. "Then we'll keep that alliance. If the Emperor attacks your galaxy, we'll be there. If he attacks ours, you'll be there. And if he comes for the seal again, we'll all be here." Xylon bowed deeply. "The Wardens of Zakuul thank you. The Multiverse thanks you. Go now with honor, and know that you are no longer alone in the darkness." The golden portal to Dagobah stabilized. Yoda's voice came through, gentle but strong. "Time to return, it is. Much to discuss, we have." Luke looked at the Avengers. "Will I see you again?" Steve smiled. "Count on it." One by one, they stepped back through the portal, first Luke, then the Avengers. They emerged in the Dagobah clearing, where Yoda waited. The portal closed behind them, leaving no trace except the memory of a dead world and a battle that had saved more than anyone would ever know. On Zakuul, Xylon stood guard once more, but now he did not stand alone. In his mind, he felt the presence of allies across realities, of hope that had been reforged in battle, and in the Temple of the Void, the seal glowed with a steady white light, a light that was part Captain America's unwavering courage, part Iron Man's brilliant hope, part Thor's divine strength, part Hulk's compassionate rage, part Black Widow's redeemed spirit, part Hawkeye's steadfast loyalty. part Bruce Banner's endless perseverance, and part Luke Skywalker's newfound belief. A light that said, no matter the darkness, heroes would always rise to meet it. Across the galaxy, Emperor Palpatine plotted his revenge. Across realities, shadows stirred. The war was not over, but for the first time, the light had the advantage, and that changed everything. 3 days after returning from Zakuul, the Avengers gathered in the repaired Sanctum Sanctorum. The air still carried the faint scent of ozone and magic, but the scars of battle were healing both in the stone walls and in the people within them. Luke Skywalker had returned to Dagobah, the white lightsaber now his to wield. Yoda had recognized its significance immediately, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of a bond between realities. A new hope. This represents, the ancient master had said, not just for our galaxy, but for all galaxies. Before Luke left, Steve had given him a communications device, a modified sling ring communicator that Strange had created. If you need us, call. No matter where we are, no matter what we're facing, we'll answer. Luke had taken it with a promise. And if you need the Force, we'll be there. Now, sitting around a table covered in holographic star charts and mystical diagrams, the Avengers faced their new reality. So, Tony said, breaking the silence, we're officially interdimensional guardians. That's a step up from fighting robots in Sokovia. We always knew our responsibility extended beyond Earth, Steve said quietly. He was studying a map of the multiverse that Strange had projected countless realities, countless threats. But this is bigger than I imagined. It is, Strange agreed. The seal on Zakuul is secure for now, but the Emperor knows its location. He'll try again, and he's not the only threat. The Bendu, the Void, other entities we haven't even encountered yet, they're all out there. Bruce pushed his glasses up his nose. We need a system, a way to monitor dimensional activity, detect incursions before they happen, and respond quickly. Like S.H.I.E.L.D., but for the multiverse, Natasha said. Exactly. Tony pulled up a design on his holographic display. I've been working on something. The Dimensional Monitoring and Response Network, DMRN for short. Satellites in orbit around Earth that scan for extra-dimensional energy signatures, tied into Strange's mystical wards and Asgard's observatory. If anything tries to cross over, we'll know. Thor nodded. Heimdall has already agreed to watch the cosmic pathways. His sight extends far, but even he cannot see into other realities. Your technology combined with his vision that could give us the warning we need. Clint leaned back in his chair. And what about when something does come through? We can't be everywhere at once. We won't have to be. Steve brought up a roster on the display. Earth's enhanced individuals, allies, potential allies. We expand the Avengers, not just for Earth threats, but for multiversal ones. We train them, prepare them, starting with the ones who already know about other realities, Natasha said. Wanda, Vision, Spider-Man. They've already seen things most people haven't. The planning session lasted hours. They mapped out protocols, response teams, research divisions. Tony would handle technology and monitoring. Strange and Wong would cover mystical threats and dimensional theory. Thor would liaise with Asgard and the other realms. Bruce would study the nature of cross-dimensional energy and its effects on biology. Natasha and Clint would handle recruitment and training, and Steve would coordinate it all, the strategic mind that had led them through a war in another galaxy. But as the meeting wound down, a question hung in the air, unasked, until Wong spoke it aloud. What about the rebellion? What about the war we left behind? Steve had been expecting this question. He'd been asking it of himself since they returned. He activated the communications device Luke had left them, a simple hollow projector that showed a slowly rotating rebel emblem. Leia's last transmission said they were making progress, Steve said. The intelligence we sent helped them liberate 5 systems. The Empire's grip is weakening in the Outer Rim, but the Emperor is still in power, Bruce pointed out. And now he's not just a galactic threat, he's a multiversal one. And we hurt him, Thor said. a note of satisfaction in his voice. "On Zakuul, we didn't just stop him, we wounded his pride, his power. He will be desperate now, dangerous in new ways." Steve nodded. "Which is why we need to be ready. But we also need to respect the autonomy of that galaxy. It's not our war to fight for them. It's their war. Our role is to support, not to lead. Like we did with the supplies," Clint said. "And the intelligence." "Exactly. And if they ask for more, we give it. If they ask for us, we consider it carefully. But we don't impose ourselves where we're not wanted or needed." It was a delicate balance, and they all knew it. The desire to help, to fix things, was strong in all of them, but they'd learned on Zakuul that some battles had to be fought by the people whose home it was. Their role was to be allies, not saviors. As they were wrapping up, Jarvis's voice came through the speakers. "Sir, I'm receiving a priority transmission. Origin, unknown. Encryption matches rebel protocols. But it's coming through a dimensional relay I cannot identify." Steve stood. "Put it through." The hologram shifted, showing not Leia, but someone they hadn't seen in months, Han Solo. He looked older, wearier, but the familiar smirk was still there. "Hey Cap, Tony, everyone." Han nodded to each of them. "Long time no see. Heard you've been busy saving realities and whatnot." "Han," Steve said, smiling despite himself. "Good to see you. How's Leia?" "The rebellion? Alive. Kicking. Thanks to you." Han's expression grew serious. "Look, I'm not one for long speeches, so I'll cut to it. We've got a situation. The Emperor's gone quiet. Too quiet. Intel says he's pulled back to the core worlds, and he's not responding to attacks like he used to. Leia thinks he's planning something big, something worse than the Death Star." "What kind of something?" Tony asked. "Don't know. But we've intercepted transmissions about a project called Star Forge. Ancient tech, supposedly. Builds ships, weapons, armies fast. Like, build a fleet in days fast. If the Emperor gets his hands on it, he becomes unstoppable," Steve finished, "even with the rebellion's new advantages." "Right. So here's the thing." Han leaned closer to the hologram recorder. "We think we know where it is. Rakata Prime, deep in the unknown regions. But getting there, that's the problem. It's guarded by something worse than star destroyers. Ancient defenses, traps, things that make no sense. And you want our help?" Natasha said. "Not exactly." Han ran a hand through his hair. "Leia says this is our fight. And she's right. But we could use some advice. You've faced things we haven't. Ancient powers, dimensional weirdness. We're sending a team in: Luke, me, Chewie, a couple others. If you've got any tips on fighting things that shouldn't exist, we'd appreciate it." Steve looked at his team, seeing the same thought in all their eyes. They couldn't go fight this battle for the rebellion, but they could offer wisdom earned through pain and experience. "Tell Luke to trust the light," Steve said. "Not just the Force, but the light inside himself. The light we saw on Zakuul. It's stronger than any darkness," Tony added. "And tell your techs to scan for exotic energy signatures. If this Star Forge is ancient tech, it might use power sources you're not familiar with. Look for patterns that don't match anything in your databases." Bruce said, "Be careful with biology. Ancient places often have contaminants, diseases, parasites, things that don't show up on normal scans." Natasha and Clint offered tactical advice: how to approach unknown defenses, how to watch for traps within traps. Thor's advice was simplest: face the unknown with courage, but not arrogance. Even gods can fall to pride. Han listened, nodding slowly. "Thanks. Really. This helps." He paused, then added, "Leia wanted me to tell you something." She said, "Hope isn't just a feeling, it's a weapon. And you taught us how to wield it." The transmission ended, leaving them in thoughtful silence. "They'll be okay," Clint said after a moment. "They're tough. And they've got Luke." "They do," Steve agreed. "And we have our own work to do. He looked around the table at his team, his friends. They'd been through hell together, more than once. In their own world and others, they'd faced down gods, monsters, aliens, and Sith lords, and they were still here, still fighting. 6 months ago, we were stranded in another galaxy, fighting a war we didn't start, Steve said. Today, we're back home, but we're not the same. We're not just Earth's Avengers anymore. We're something more. We're the line between reality and chaos, between light and darkness. He stood, and the others stood with him. Our mission hasn't changed, Steve continued. Protect people, in all realities. But our methods have to change. We have to be smarter, stronger, more prepared than ever before. Tony activated a hologram that showed their new plan, the DMRN network, the expanded Avengers, the alliances with Asgard, and the Rebellion and Xylon. We're building something new, something that can stand against whatever comes next. And when it comes, Natasha said, a small smile on her face, we'll be ready. They spent the rest of the day putting their plans into motion. Tony and Bruce returned to Stark Tower to begin construction on the monitoring satellites. Thor departed for Asgard to formalize their alliance with the 9 realms. Natasha and Clint began reaching out to potential new Avengers. Steve and Strange remained in the Sanctum, studying the map of the multiverse. There will be more threats, Strange said quietly. The Emperor is just one. The void that Xylon guards against is another, and there are other things, beings that feed on reality itself. I know, Steve said, but we'll face them, together. He looked at the map, at the countless stars, the countless worlds, the countless realities. It should have been overwhelming, terrifying, but Steve Rogers had never been good at being afraid. He'd been a skinny kid from Brooklyn who stood up to bullies. He'd been a soldier who jumped on a grenade to save his squad. He'd been a man out of time who built a new life and a new family. He'd been a leader in a war across the stars, and now he was something new. A guardian of realities, a symbol of hope across dimensions. It was a big responsibility, maybe the biggest anyone had ever faced, but he wasn't alone. He had Tony's genius, Bruce's wisdom, Thor's power, Natasha's skill, Clint's loyalty, Strange's magic, and so many others. He had the light they'd forged together on Zakuul, a light that was now part of the seal holding back the darkness. He had allies in a galaxy far, far away, fighting their own war, winning their own victories. And he had the unwavering belief that no matter how dark it got, how impossible the odds, light would always find a way, because that's what heroes did. They found a way. 3 months later, in a hidden base on Hoth, Princess Leia Organa studied the latest intelligence reports. The raid on Rakata Prime had been a success. Luke's team had destroyed the Star Forge before the Empire could claim it. The rebellion was gaining ground, system by system, but Leia felt no triumph, only determination. The war was far from over. Her comm device chimed a secure channel, one that only a handful of people knew about. She answered it, and Steve Rogers' hologram appeared. Leia, it's good to see you. You too, Captain. She smiled genuinely for the first time in days. We did it. The Star Forge is gone. We heard. Congratulations. That's a major victory. Thanks to your advice. Luke said your words about the light. They helped. More than you know. Steve's hologram nodded. How's Han? Recovering. He took a blaster bolt protecting Chewie. He'll be fine, but he's milking it for all it's worth. Leia's smile faded. The Emperor is quiet. Too quiet. We're worried about what he's planning next. So are we. Our monitoring network is up and running. We'll warn you if we detect anything heading your way. Thank you. Leia paused, then said, You know, for a long time, I thought hope was something we had to create ourselves. To build from nothing. But you showed me something different. Hope can be given, shared, multiplied. That's why we fight, Steve said. Not just to protect what we have, but to build something better. For everyone. In every reality. They talked for a few more minutes, updates, plans, promises to stay in touch. When the transmission ended, Leia looked at the rebel emblem on the wall. Hope. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a connection, a bond between warriors across stars and dimensions. It was a weapon, and they would wield it until the darkness was gone for good. In the Sanctum Sanctorum, Steve closed the communication channel. He walked to the window, looking out at the New York skyline. The city was alive with light, with life, with people going about their days unaware of the battles being fought to keep them safe, unaware of the war across realities. But that was okay. They didn't need to know. They just needed to live their lives, to hope, to dream, to build. That's what the Avengers fought for. That's what the Rebellion fought for. That's what Xylon fought for. The right to hope. Steve's comm buzzed an alert from the DMRN. A minor dimensional fluctuation near the moon. Probably nothing. But they would check it out, because that's what they did. They stood guard, they stood together, and they never, ever gave up. The collision of realities has left permanent marks on the Avengers, on the Rebellion, on the multiverse itself. Earth's mightiest heroes are no longer bound by a single world's concerns. They have become guardians of the infinite, their responsibility stretching across dimensions. The white lightsaber, now with Luke Skywalker, stands as a symbol of this new alliance, a bridge of light between galaxies. The Emperor's defeat on Zakuul was not an ending, but a transformation of the conflict. The Galactic Civil War continues, but with new hope born from cross-dimensional friendship. The Rebellion fights with sharper intelligence, harder resolve, and the knowledge that they are not alone in the cosmos. For the Avengers, every sunrise now carries the weight of countless worlds. They watch not just Earth's skies, but the spaces between realities, standing ready for whatever darkness comes next. Their story has expanded from a single planet to the multiverse, proving that heroism, like hope, transcends all boundaries. The war across the stars continues. The watch across realities begins anew. And somewhere in the infinite vastness, light always finds a way.